The Kann defense. You're about to learn everything there is to learn about the Kann. The opening move, the middle game plans, the theory, the traps, the tactics, everything. In addition to that, you guys know that my book is out. And if you want my book, send an email with the word book to chesswithhakeem@gmail.com. I will be hosting an online event for everyone who got the book. So if you haven't gotten it as yet, this is your chance to get it. With that being said, if you're trying to master the Kann, watch this full video. Apply what I teach and watch your ratings goes through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region. Today I'm going to be teaching you guys the Caro defense. Very, very solid opening. It's very hard to beat with the white pieces as well. Let's see how our opponents decide to play. Okay, we're basically seeing the two knights attack, which once they don't push the pawn or take, I like to just take on e4. And my next move is going to be knight f6, inviting a Tartakowa type of setup. So my opponent decides to play d3. Now, if I takes, trade the queens, he loses the right to castle, but as black, I'm not going to be gaining anything from that. So I'm going to just focus on my development. I'm actually going to put my queen on c7. It makes it hard for the bishop to get access to this diagonal. And if he decides to castle on the king side, my queen will already be targeting his focal point on h2. But he plays g3. Why he plays g3? Because he really wants the bishop on the f4 square. So what I'm going to do is to prevent this, I'm going to play the move e5. I'm allowing knight takes f6, pawn takes f6. In a scenario like this, then I just don't need to castle on the king side anymore. But he did not go for that. He Keto his bishop, and I'll simply develop my bishop to e7. So at least in this scenario, if he takes on f6, I have the option of playing bishop takes f6 and not necessarily doubling up my pawns. Okay, he castled his king. Now it's time to finish our development. Let's develop the bishop, develop the knight, and then once all our pieces are developed, we get the king castled and start our attack. Okay, he's also trying to finish his development. I'm I'm going to play the prophylactic h6 so that way none of his knight is able to harass my bishop. I mean, my knight is able to harass his bishop from either g4 or d5. And then he plays bishop to c5. That's a nice move, by the way. I mean, if I takes knight takes, he's automatically attacking my bishop. So I'm going to choose to take with the knight, and now he has to be careful, which he was not careful. He was a bit too reactive. What he needed to do was take my bishop first. But because he takes back, now there's nothing guarding his bishop. So it's kind of like a removing the guard tactic, but he needed to play an in-between move. And just like that, we're already ahead by a piece. Okay, pawn c3. I guess he wants to play b4 and chase away the bishop. Let's finish our development. Whoa, guy played knight d4. What was that? My pawn, my pawn is sitting on e5, bro. That's just a knight. It's kind of crazy. All right, fair enough. Let's just pull the bishop back to e7. There's a very high chance that he's gonna play d5 and try to open the position and then get his rook on the e file. So I'm gonna put my bishop on e7, just so that I'm able to defend against that. But being ahead by two pieces, this makes the game easy for me. All right, queen h5. I'm just gonna castle. I don't think it matters where I castle. My king is gonna be safe in all variations. Usually in the Caracan, you're going to be seeing me castling on the king side, mostly though. Knight f6 is also a free tempo on the queen. At this point, my goal is not necessarily to start an attack on his king. Like, I'm ahead by so many pieces. Trading is good enough. That's an unprotected pawn. I'll move my knight out the way so that way the rook hits the pawn. I'm expecting him to protect it, but I just need to use all my pieces to attack this pawn, and I think I'll win that pawn, assuming he sees that I'm currently attacking it. So he saw that. This is now left unprotected, but my least active piece is my 8th rook. So what I'm going to do is play rook to d7. Idea is to double up my rooks on the d file, and then my goal is to win the pawn. I mean, he should be trying to trade since he's down in material. If I takes, he basically wants to pin my rook. So let's just continue with the plan, apply pressure to the pawn. If he takes, I'm just going to take back, and this pawn will eventually die. So let's just take back, assuming he's still going to try to target my pawn. Queen comes in. My pawns are under attack, which I don't really care. Like, my goal is to trade. I don't mind giving him like one pawn once we're trading the pieces off the board. So he did take the pawn. This knight isn't really doing much. This pawn will still be hanging. I'm going to go with bishop to g5, protecting the pawn, also offering up a trade of queens. And if he trades the queens, then it's just over. Like I'm ahead by 2 pieces. My goal from here is just a trade. Okay, that was a nice move. Checking the king because he wants to take here. All right, let's just block. And if he takes with check, I move and then try to get my knight into the attack. Queen by itself is not going to do much. Another check. Let's block the check. Now we're attacking his queen. Queen moves, and now we trade the rooks off the board. That's what we do. You're ahead in material, just trade the pieces off the board. If he checks, then I'm just going to move away with the king. I mean, if it's a case where he allows some queen trades in the future, that's also going to make it easier for us. But let's move away the king for the time being. He has a pass pawn. Was expecting him to start rolling the pass pawn up the board. It's not going to go anywhere though, since my queen and my bishop is guarding against it. So now I just need to get my knight over into the attack somewhere around here, trying to see if it's possible for me to set up some types of checkmate. Already he gave me the pawn. I'll take with the queen because I'm trying to trade. And again, yo, that was nice. Forgot that my knight was unprotected. I just lost an entire piece. Whoa. All right, we're going to have to convert this a bit slow. Let's hit the queen. Still winning because I'm ahead by 2 pieces or 1 extra piece, but I shouldn't have lost that knight. Okay. Okay. He gave us the queen. He's kind. Like, he's like, okay, bro, I knew you didn't want to lose that knight, so I'll give you the queen. Okay. He hits the queen. Now we're just going for checkmate. Goal is to see if we can gang up on his f2 pawn to deliver a checkmate. Okay. King is running, trying to prevent his king from running here, cutting off the running squares for the king. If the king goes here, then I'll continue to cut off the running squares. Okay, let's just roll these pawns up the board. Bishop here is an idea because this pawn is pinned. I don't care about what he's doing on the queen side. It does nothing. Okay, let's take here. Again, the king can't run. If he tries to run, then it's mate. So he took. Now we attack this pawn. And then there's nothing you could do to prevent a checkmate. But for 500, I think this guy played really well. Apart from the fact when he just gave me pieces, he played really well. There's nothing to prevent this mate. And if he runs the king here, that's going to be mate. He took the pawn, and that's just a checkmate. More Huracan defense against 600 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 600. Let me show you guys some more Huracan defense. Yo, guy played knight e2. Okay, I've never seen knight e2 before. That's definitely a new move. But any move they play after c6, we're always going to be playing d5. And it's kind of like he's mixing up the advanced variation as well. I mean, I guess he created his own opening. But let's go c5 here. Let's not get this bishop out just yet. You know, I like to play c5 and knight c6 first. Usually when this knight goes to f3, I like to pin, but the knight is not on f3, so maybe a bit tricky. Okay, d4 was played, and I'll just keep developing. Never be afraid of them taking on c5, guys. It's a very easy pawn to retrieve. Plus, if they take on c5, we're going to be taking on e5. So he plays c3. Now I'll develop the bishop. Doesn't make sense putting it on g4 since he'll just play f3. And then I'll play e6, knight e7. Usually the bishop goes to f5. So whenever you put the bishop on the f5 square, usually you have to move it again in order to put the knight there, which is why I like to just pin the knight and get rid of the bishop. Now he took on c5. That pawn is hanging, by the way, but let's just play e6 first. Now he has 2 pawns under attack. So if he plays b4, I'll just take on e5. Even though in these types of scenarios, b4 is not usually a bad move because it gives him a lot of attacking possibilities on the queen side. Okay, so b4 was played. Now we take on e5. All right, knight jumps in, hits the bishop. There's also bishop b5, which could be a bit weird. All right, what I'm going to have to do, guys, is I'm going to just take on b1. You know, I'm trying to get a tempo here because once he checks, if I block with the knight, knight takes, I lose the rook. I think it's actually good if he just checks me here, but he didn't. All right, so rook b1, and let's develop this knight. Still, if he checks, I'll be able to block with one of the knights on c6. I didn't want to move this knight since, like, I need to develop a new piece each time. Now that he checks, I'll block with the knight. And my knight is supporting the other knight. I think my knight is going to have to stay on e7 for a while. And based on this position, well, I was about to say I need to Fianchetto, but He gave up the bishop for the knight pretty early. Still, white has a nice position though. Then the queen comes in to pin this guy. All right, we have to defend. If he plays knight takes, I'll play pawn takes, and then I'll just develop on castle. So b4 hits the knight. If I take on d4, he's going to take with the pawn, and I will not be able to take here. So instead, I'll just move the knight to e5, threatening some forking ideas, trying to win this pawn. If he pushes the pawn to c6, that could be a bit tricky. I think I should be fine taking and then playing queen c7. All right, so he did play c6. It's getting a bit tricky now. I take, he takes. Or I move, he takes, I takes, he push, I block. Whoa. Takes? Okay, let's just move. Let's not take. Oh, shoot. But then he has b6. Okay, I think b6 would have been such a nice move. He castled instead. Okay, I still have to develop. Bishop to f4, I'm sure he wants to play. All right, let's just take here first. Maybe he's going to play pawn takes and then knight b5 becomes a threat. Okay, pawn takes. I want to castle. I just want to castle quick. Knight b5 is going to be a hard threat to deal with. Or maybe it's not a hard threat. Let's kick the knight. Bishop f4 though. Bishop f4 is going to be very strong. I just want to castle though. Like honestly, I'm just trying to castle. Guy's only 600. His strength is definitely surprising. There's also rook to b7, which is very strong. Okay, bishop goes to f4. I'm just gonna run, bro. Honestly, I'm gone. I'm gone. Think he should have played rook b7. I mean, still he's able to play rook b7. I don't know. This is weird. And there's a little idea that I'm trying to do. Like, I want to check him here, and then if he takes, I take the bishop. But if I check him here, he's gonna take with the knight. Whoa, rook comes down to b7. So I think I have to go queen d6. All right, how am I gonna do this? How am I gonna do this? Rook to e1 is an idea. Okay, he took. I'll just take back. That's a very strong pawn. And then the queen comes in to attack the bishop. All right, so first of all, I have two pieces attacking this knight. Let's just take. Still, this is going to be a very strong pass pawn. I think he just gave me a free pawn there, though. That was a very weird move. All right, so rook is behind the pawn, very strong. I'm only ahead by a pawn, so it's very tricky still. All right, what I need to, I think he's going to play c7 and then rook down. So I need my queen in the defense for sure. But let's get the rook behind the pawn first. I think that's important. All right, pawn goes down to c7, man. Tricky, tricky. Okay, let's try this. Hit the pawn, hit the rook. Once the rook goes here, I'm probably just lost. I'm attacking this rook first, but once he plays rook to b8, I'm more than likely just lost here. All right, so he saves the rook. This rook is doing absolutely nothing. Rook down, takes, pawn takes. Okay, let's go g6. I'm gonna try to play king g7 at least, like, so that way once the rooks start coming down here, like, I don't have anything pinned on the background. Okay, so he plays g3, smooth the queen out the way, hit the unprotected rook. Rook moves out the way. All right, how does this work? I think let's hit the rook again. I need to cover the b8 square. Let's hit the rook again. Rook here, I'll go back. This rook just needs to join the game. I really don't like this position, guys. I really don't. Okay, let's go king up. His time is also running out though, so that's nice. If I could get my queen back and then start rolling the pawns up the board, then that should be good. Queen comes in. Okay, that doesn't really do much. Okay, now I'm going to start rolling my pawn up the board. Time is running out, guys, so we definitely have a chance. Rook goes back. My God, I think he's just going to win my pawn. Guy's just going to win my pawn. All right, I'm already ahead by a pawn. Okay, maybe I should just give back one. a5, rook takes. Okay, let's try to play the endgame. I think if I play the endgame, I can at least flag him. But I don't like to accuse people of cheating, guys, but dang, this guy's so strong for 600. It's crazy. It's crazy. But he's gonna lose this game though. He's definitely gonna lose this game. If it's only 600 and he's playing this well, then he has so much potential. He's basically just outplaying a chess master. Okay, now I'm trying to get my king over in the game. Okay, let's take first, then hit the rook. Very good, very good. He needs to guard the rook. Didn't guard the rook. Now I'm going to try to get this rook to attack the pawn. Good. Now we have two attackers, and then we take the pawn. All right, we're winning again, guys, but dang, how weird was this game, though? Now it's just completely winning. If he blocks, then he resigns. More Caro defense against 700 rated players. Do stick around. Our opponent is now 700. We will be playing some more Caro defense, and looks like the low rated guys are playing super strong today. So we definitely need to lock in. So now we play d5. Knight c3, we take on e4, and then once they take, we play knight f6, bringing us into the Tartakawa variation of the Karakan, unless he wants to play knight g5 with some alien gambit stuff, but I don't think we're going to see that. Okay, so he did take the pawn. Now we play e takes, and my goal is basically to go bishop to d6 and castle. From a theoretical perspective, c3, bishop d3, queen c2, targeting h7, that's usually where they go. But players here usually just develop the knight, develop the bishop, and castle, which is not bad. They're still following principles. So knight was developed. Let's develop the bishop. This will be the setup that we're always going to be using when we get this Tartakawa type of pawn structure. All right, so I guess that's exactly what he's going for. Again, it is very principled. So I play this position differently, and I always end up with similar positions. Like I usually go rook e8 and put my knight on f7. Eventually, my bishop goes to e6 or g4. Once you guys know that, then you're good with the Tartakal. Okay, he also got his king out the center of the board. Let's pin this knight first. Usually here they play h3. There are times when I just get my knight to f7. There are times when I get my bishop out first. Like sometimes it's a matter of preference, but again, once you guys know where the pieces belong, it doesn't really matter which pieces you put on a certain square first. Okay, so he chased away the bishop. Let's just pull the bishop back to h5 and maintain the pin on his knight. c4, maybe he's going to be attacking my bishop. Let's keep our development here. Now all my minor pieces are developed. He's putting his rook on the file. Not bad. Now, I want to go queen c7. Pawn c5 may be annoying, so I'm going to play pawn c5 first. Then I may try to go queen c7. And obviously, if he takes, my knight hits the bishop. If he plays d5, I may not immediately go knight e5, but knight e5 becomes possible. Okay, instead he just develops the bishop. The guy's not trying to waste any time. He's trying to finish his development quick. But let's go queen c7. All his minor pieces are out. All my minor pieces are out. My rooks are connected, but he has one rook on the file. None of my rooks are on the file. So I think the position here is just equal. But it's usually the tactics that determines the game. Right now, I'm not really seeing any tactical stuff happening. I mean, my bishop is pinning his knight, but that's all I'm seeing. Bishop comes in to apply some pressure to the knight. I did say that I would prefer my knight to be on the c5 square, so I'll take on d4, so that way my knight gets access to either c5 or e5. Also, that pawn becomes unprotected. Okay, he take back. And instead of putting my bishop on c5, I'm going to choose e5. Because for one, the knight is pinned, so the knight is not able to take. If he takes with the bishop, I'll just take back, hit the pawn. If he plays b3, however, then I'm able to take on f3, and that's going to give him a very bad pawn structure. But he's still playing some good chess. He has no bad pieces. He has no exposed king. All his pieces are doing well. I just need to ensure that I put all my pieces on good squares, so that way, once the tactics present itself, I do not miss it. Okay, bishop goes back. All right, I think I have an idea here. Because what he wants is, if I take his knight, he takes with the bishop, he does not have double pawns. It's not necessarily a tactic per wait. If I push, my knight becomes a bit weak. If he takes my knight, I take his bishop. Yeah, let's just push. What I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to sacrifice this pawn. And then if the bishop decides to take, that's when I take on f3. And then his king is going to be exposed. I'm doing this by sacrificing a pawn, though. Okay, he did take. That's what I wanted, by the way. Now we take, his king is now exposed, but we are down by a pawn. From this position, I need to ensure that all my pieces are active. Rooks do need file. Let's play rook to d8, putting my rook on the same line as his queen. So now we're starting to set up some tactical ideas. He moves the king out the way. Is this a tactical alert? There's something about this that tells me that some tactic is probably here. First thing is my rook is on the same line as his king. So what is preventing me from playing something like bishop c5, hit the bishop, and if the bishop move, we win the queen? Oh, he's actually able to play bishop e5 here, guys. Like leaving his queen under attack, knowing that if I take his queen, he takes my queen. At that point, I'm able to win like a pawn, but with his king being that exposed, I want more than a pawn. And I know exactly what I'm going to do. So I think it is a tactic alert. If he puts the bishop on e5, we go queen c6. So the rook hits the queen, but we still have two pieces attacking f3. Okay. So he decides to play rook g1, and there's two pieces attacking me on g7. The thing is, though, I'm able to just take. Do we take with the rook or the bishop? Not 100% sure, but free piece is free piece. He also has less than a minute on his clock. So bro has been using up his time. Okay, queen goes to c2. Yes, he's applying pressure to h7 twice on my focal point, but he just made a drawback mistake. Like he's trying to move his queen off the same line as my rook, but notice how the queen on d1 was guarding the pawn on f3. So by moving the queen from d1 to c2, the queen no longer guards the pawn on f3, and now we're able to take on f3 with check. Because his king is not able to move, he's then forced to block with the rook. So, and we're already ahead by 3, so we're about to win good amount of material. He blocks with the rook. The rook is already dead, so we don't necessarily need to take a piece that is already dead. Let's just go g6, guarding my g7 pawn. Usually I like to take the rook or any material that they have after they try to defend against it. For example, if he plays bishop g4 or bishop e4, he's going to lose this game on time though. Like he's really using up his time. Bishop goes back. Still, the rook is dead, so we don't need to take it as yet. Let's go queen f4. The rook is also pinned. My goal is to apply pressure to the pinned rook, but with 0.01 seconds on the clock. It doesn't matter what I play here. He lost on time. Good game. More Kann defense against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800. We are playing some more Kann defense. Pawn to d3. This not something that I've seen a lot, but let's see what his idea is because it is blocking out his bishop. He develops the bishop, and I'm not gonna take because actually I've seen Magnus Carlsen play this with the white pieces. So maybe this guy is Magnus in disguise. All right, so since he's not really making a lot of effort to control the center, let's just put two pawns in the center. This is just me going back to principles. He develops the bishop to e3, and now I'm just going to be focusing on my development. And then he develops the knight to f3. Now I'm attacking his pawn twice, but he's also attacking my pawn. So I'm going to first play bishop d6, guarding the pawn. And then, based on what he does, for example, c3, which didn't do anything, and then we take the free pawn because I just have two attackers versus his one defender. And after I take the pawn, from here it's just normal development, and we are already ahead by a pawn. Okay, he got his king castled. I'm also going to get my king castled. Then he plays knight d2. The good thing is he's finishing his development pretty quickly, and okay, I don't want to waste a lot of time pulling my knight back, especially since I'm ahead in material. So let's just trade here. And then after queen takes, there's definitely a lot of stuff happening here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my queen to c7. I'm assuming our rook is going to come and attack my bishop. And then I'm going to be forced to play rook to d8 and guard it. Okay, he plays g3. He's basically noticing this. Now, what you guys need to notice is I'm still in the opening while my opponent is in the middle game. I mean, I'm ahead by a pawn, which is some compensation, but I need to be very careful here. Let's just try to finish my development as quickly as possible. Let's develop the bishop. I don't want to play knight d7 because I know rook to d1 is going to be a very annoying attacking move. May even put my knight on the edge of the board, but once he takes, my pawns are doubled. Usually, Caro players don't like to have a bad pawn structure. Oh boy, now I have to move my bishop again. The good thing is, I will move the bishop again because he's eventually going to have to move his knight again because his knight is now on the edge of the board. So my plan from here is to play knight a6, maybe to c5. Like, I don't necessarily want him to take and double up my pawns, but if he do, I know that I'm going to have the bishop here as compensation. Okay, but he puts the bishop on f3, which means we're no longer afraid of double pawns anymore. Let's put the knight on the edge of the board. Remember, guys, we don't put knights on the edge of the board for them to stay on the edge of the board. The edge of the board is just a route that you take. Eventually, my knight will be going to c7 or c5, depending on what happens. But luckily, I'm now in the middle game. My rooks are connected. After connecting my rooks, now it's just a matter of swinging them in the game. So let's play rook to d8, swinging my rook in the game. I'm also putting my rook on the same line as the opponent's queen. Queen, he saw that, moved the queen out the way. All right, how do we attack here? Uh, there's knight coming to f5, which could be annoying. So I'm actually going to play f5. Me playing f5 prevents the knight from going to f5. It also threatens f4 in some scenarios to attack his bishop. So it's kind of like a multi-purpose move. But then he played f4 to prevent my f4, and I'll play e4 because now I have a pass pawn, and his light-squared bishop is now not active. And a dream of mine would be the knight which is on the edge of the board, which does not belong on the edge of the board, will be going to c5, then to d3, which is a very nice square for a knight. Okay, rook joins the game. Rook is now on the open file. Let's go with the plan, knight c5. Eventually, my goal is to get the knight on the d3 square. I mean, I have a lot of active pieces. The opponent is not blundering or anything. But let's see. He has a knight on the edge of the board. This bishop is not really good. Aside from that, I mean, black is doing okay. Or white is doing okay. Okay, he took. Gave up the bishop for the knight. Fine by me. Let's just take. Now that he moves the king, I need my light squared bishop a bit more active. Let's go here, hit the rook. And eventually my plan is to play bishop to d3. So even though I was not able to get my knight on the square, getting my bishop on the square is not bad at all. Okay, it's very important that I don't rush it though, because if I go here, that could be an annoying check. And there's also ideas where he takes and then this pawn is left unprotected. So let's just play g3. So for when I guard the pawn, his knight is still on the edge of the board. Pulling back the bishop is very smart since that was a bishop that was not doing anything. So he's basically neutralizing pieces on his half of the board. Not bad at all. Okay, if I go here, takes, rook takes, let's just trade. Yeah, I think it's best if I just trade there. Maybe the best way how I'm going to win this game is with the endgame since I have the pass pawn, which I could consider pushing. Knight g2 to e3 is also a nice plan. Yeah, we're just going to have to play the endgame. Let's play the endgame. I'm going to attack the pawn. I'm expecting queen b3, just trading the queens off the board. And then I'm just going to try to activate my king as best as I can. Okay, he plays a3. Guess he does not want an endgame. All right, how does this work? Okay, let's go queen c4. That's a very active square for the queen. It's also on his half of the board. In some cases, I could also be preparing queen or rook d3. Pawn b3 just attacks the queen though. Pawn b3 just attacks the queen. Okay, rook joins the game. Rook d3, takes, don't really do much for me to be honest. It really doesn't. Let's go a5. I'm trying to play a4 to prevent b3. He's still able to play b3. If he does play b3, I'll just pull the queen back though. Now he's trying to go knight e3. Like, this guy is very strong. This guy is very strong. Knight g2 to e3 hits the queen. And it's also going to be blockading my pass pawn. So, yeah, it's going to be one of those cases where I just give up the bishop for the knight. So, yes, we're going to have to just play the endgame. This guy's playing very well. And it's not like the 600 rated guy. Like, this guy is just really playing some good chess. All right, so he's not able to double up right now. I'm going to play b5 so that way if I have to move away my queen, I do not lose this pawn. In terms of what's happening, I think black has a slight advantage in terms of a space advantage. Tactics alert. He played so well, though. He played so well, man. Tactic alert, though, guys. You notice what's happening with this rook? Like, the queen is the only defender of the rook. Like, that off the bat just shows that he's going to lose some material. It's just a removing the guard tactic. And the funny thing is, once I take the queen, it's not like he's able to take here first because it's not a check. So he has to take, and then he's just going to lose an entire rook. I was prepared to just go to war with this guy all the way in the end game, but, things like this happens, which is why he's 800. But you guys are already seeing the potential that this guy has. Like, once he works on these slight blunders, his ratings will definitely go through the roof. Now that I'm ahead by so many material, the goal is to obviously just trade everything off the board. Also, I'm trying to roll my pass pawn up the board, and once I get a queen, he will be getting checkmated. But this guy really played some chess. He resigns. More Huracan defense against 900 level players. Stick around. Your opponent is now 900, playing some more Huracan defense. All right, knight f3, we play d5, Usually at the lower level, we see a lot of exchange variation. And sometimes we see advanced variation at the lower level because, it's just cool to not take the pawn and gain some space. But, okay, bishop b5, I haven't really seen a lot. Development is easy though. It's just a matter of developing the knight. I have no idea why you would want to move the bishop again. Let's just develop our pieces normally. Now he plays d4, and this is not a tactic alert, guys. Like, even though it's an exposed king and an unprotected bishop, if I check, he blocks with the pawn, the queen guards the bishop. I check, he blocks with the knight guards the bishop. So let's just keep developing our pieces. Bishop usually goes to g4 or f5. Let's just choose g4 now, pin the knight. And usually, once they play h3, takes followed by knight takes is good, but it's not possible here due to the pin. Let's just pull back, maintaining the pin. And then after he castle, I play e6 and develop. Another cool thing about the Caro-Kann is this pawn structure. It allows us to keep our king in the center of the board a bit longer. Let's just keep developed though, because even after the rook comes on the file, we're still doing fine. So now we have 4 pieces developed. All we need to do now is to castle our king, connect to our rooks, and we're out of the opening. And the opponent already made a bad move. I mean, it's not like it's a tactic alert or anything, but the queen was actually the primary defender of the knight on f3, not the pawn. Like, because now the pawn is the main defender of g3, obviously I'm going to be giving up my bishop for the knight, bro. Because, I mean, look on how exposed this guy king is. And then we simply get our king out the center of the board. Once you play the Caro-Kann, it's going to be a lot of times when your pawn structure is just way better than them. And then he decides to give up his bishop for the knight. I'll just take back. Now already I only have 2 pawn island and the guy has 3. Okay, knight g3 was played. This is him trying to defend his king a bit. And my goal from here is to definitely expose that king. Let's not play any prophylactic move. Let's just go ahead and play e5. I'm trying to open the position. I wanted to prevent bishop g5, but if the bishop goes to g5, then I play h6. Playing e5 left f5 a bit unprotected, but we don't care because I'll just move the bishop if he does that. The rook comes on the file, applying pressure to the pawn. Let's go queen c7 and apply some defense to the pawn. There's also some hidden agenda with queen to c7 because notice there's now a battery pointing towards his knight, which means I'm now threatening to take the pawn and then take the knight. Like, this would be the best time for him to play knight to f5. At that point, I may have to just give him the bishop, and that's exactly what he did. If I swing the rook in the game, he takes, rook takes. Let's just take on d4. I mean, even though he has a bad pawn structure, like that's all he has. I'm not down by any material. Well, he's not down by any material or anything, and he's also developing his pieces pretty well. All right, bishop f4 is also coming. We do not want to allow bishop f4. That's going to give him a free tempo. So let's just go ahead and play c5 and hit the queen. Still able to play bishop f4 actually. Well, not really. I mean, I'll just move my queen, hit this pawn, and it's gonna be a bit uncomfortable for him. So aside from he still played bishop f4. So yeah, the guy knows some stuff. He's dabbling into the offense is the best defense type of stuff. But I'll just pull my queen back to d7. I mean, okay, the pawn is no longer guarded, but I don't care, bro. Like I'm trying to get to that king. So after the queen takes the pawn, okay, let's calm down because I'm seeing a lot of stuff happening. It's like, do I get the rook in the game so that way I'm able to take here? Nah, the threat is better than the execution. Let's take on h3, threatening the unprotected pawn on f3, and then I'm still threatening this skewer. So because he pulls the bishop back in order to guard the pawn, it's tricky, man. It's a bit tricky. Because if I use this rook, he takes this pawn, I take, and what do I really get from that? Okay, let's be a bit patient. Let's go with h5 and certain to attack the bishop, especially since there's an unprotected pawn on the same line as the queen. Guy just prevented it off the bat, though. Guy just prevented it off the bat. He's also playing fast. All right, let's pull the queen back to f5 because he's going to play queen h4. Queen back to f5 is attacking. Oh, It's like an accidental fork, but not really, because there's simply queen to d3. Apart from the fact that he just gave himself a bad pawn structure, he's playing well to defend that structure. And maybe how I'm going to try to win this game is to try to take him in the end game, because usually once you have a better pawn structure, bringing your opponent in the end game makes winning easier for you. Okay, he plays c3. He decided to guard this pawn, left this pawn unprotected. But he definitely needed to just pull the queen back, you know. That's just a pawn, bro. Still he's playing very well. I mean, I'm only ahead by a pawn. Okay, rook hits the queen. Guy's playing some chess. Let's just pull the queen back. And then he's doubling up on the rook, also playing with some speed. The rooks are very active on this file. But luckily, once I play knight e4, I'm able to, you know, the rooks are not as active. And I'm also able to apply some pressure to this bishop. You know, eventually this h4 move can also work, but it's not working on his. And guys, you're not gonna have tactics in your games if you have your rooks pointing towards your own pawns. You have to remember that rooks needs files, and if you don't put your rooks on the files, then your rooks are just gonna be sitting there not doing anything. Queen goes back, pinning the knight. If I take though, it's not good if he takes my queen because there's knight takes, which means if I take, he has to play rook takes. I'm gonna see if I can set up some tactic because of this and put my rook on the file. No, put my rook on the file. There's f3. Then if I take, I lose my rook. Come on, bro. It doesn't make any sense. All right, what do I do then? What do I do? All right, let's use this rook and put this rook on the c file. Rook still needs files. My plan is to go for some rook lift. That was a nice move. That was indeed a nice move. Hit the queen. Moving the queen out the way is fine. Queen is now on the same line as his pinned bishop, and my queen is still protecting my pawn. Okay, queen comes over. He really wants to trade. I'm trying to pin this bishop though. I mean, if I takes, I'm ahead by a pawn, so it should be winning, but his king is too weak for me to start trading. Let's keep the pin here. Remember, whenever you're attacking someone's king or you're trying to develop an attack on someone's king, you don't really want to be trading pieces. You know, you want to keep the pieces on the board. It makes the position way, way more uncomfortable for them. Now I'm threatening to play h4 and apply pressure to his pin bishop, which means I don't really care about the fact that this pawn is hanging. There's also rook e8 that could also come into play since his queen is on the e file and no longer the rook. He got his king off the same. Yo, this guy though, this guy is playing some chess. All right, so yeah, and you know, I think it's important to let you guys know when you're playing well, because you know, I mean, if he's 900 and I'm 2500, I'm gonna win the game. But like, I can feel the strength. You know, I can definitely feel the strength. Queen to g4, rook f4. There's a check here. I'm assuming he's gonna run with the king. With all of that being said, let's get this rook on the e file first, so that way he's not able to run with the king. Still, I'm not afraid of him grabbing this pawn because now every single one of my pieces are active. And remember when I told you guys that there's not going to be any tactic if your pieces are not active? For example, your rook's just pointing towards your own pawn. That's what I meant. No, my rooks are active, which means now I can start looking out for some tactics. Okay, okay. Queen goes to d3, still kind of pinning my knight, hitting the unprotected pawn. That's a check. After rook takes, that's a check. After takes, I have nothing. That's a check. There's queen takes. He's hitting the pawn. Okay, now I'm going to play queen g4. Offense is the best defense. Wait. Queen g4, rook f4, check. King can't go here. King has to go here. And then h4 because the queen is going to be on the same line as his queen. Let's go. So the difference between me and you guys, let's just say, you know, you just know what all 12 tactical weaknesses are. You know, let's just say you know them and we both know them. I'll still find more tactics because I'm better at visualization and calculation. So knowing all 12 tactical weaknesses, it is very important. But while you're learning these 12 tactical weaknesses, ensure that you're able to visualize and ensure that you're able to calculate. And the only way you're going to be able to do this is to train it. Do it over and over. And you know what the cool thing is? Tactic alert. That's the cool thing. But the other cool thing is the more you train your visualization and your calculation, the more your pattern recognition gets good. And once you have that pattern recognition down pat, it's over. Now let's talk about the tactic alert. First of all, the king and the rook is in a knight 4 pattern, but the queen is the only defender. what are we going to do about this? Because there's a bunch of tactics here. Like if you guys have positions where all your pieces are active, you should see a bunch of tactical weaknesses. So we're looking for checks, captures, and threats. That's a check. We keep it in mind. Maybe it doesn't work now, but it could work in the future. But that's a capture. And a lot of you guys are not going to be seeing tactics like these because you blunder your queen or you sack your queen. It's like naturally you don't even consider it to be a move because you're like, okay, that's not a move. You don't even say, if I take the rook, he takes my queen. Like naturally you just say it's not a move, but it is a move, bro. Because once I take his rook and he decides to take my queen, I hit him with this move, knight d2, which checks the king, hit the queen. So I basically sacrifice my queen so that way I'm able to win the exchange or maybe even more material. So this is not just game. But for 900, my opponent played really well. So the queen took, hit him with the fork. If he plays king there, he loses everything. So he has to play there. And come on, bro, you had to take the rook first. You see, he was too reactive. You notice how he basically pre-moved this, but now he lost the rook. Still would have been losing, but at least it would have been a rook for a bishop. Now it's just game. More Huracan defense against 1,000 level players. Stick around. Your opponent is now 1,000. More Huracan defense coming your way. So knight f3, we play d5, and now we're seeing e5. So this is kind of like the advanced variation without him pushing the pawn to d4. But since the knight is already on f3, we just play bishop to g4. So now we're pinning his knight, and now we know what the plan is from here. We're going to play e6, c5, knight c6, get the knight to f5, put the bishop on e7, castle the king. Like what I just said just now, if you know and understand that and how to put the pieces on those squares, then you're basically good against the advance. And I have a lot of students who are always saying, I'm fine with the Caro-Kann, but not when they play the advance. Okay, pawn d4, let's go e6 first before c5, even though I could play c5, then e6. And then once they play h3, I'm just going to take. It's fine if you pull the bishop back, but just to keep things simple, we're just going to take. Queen takes, now we play c5, because the goal in the Caro-Kann, and also the French, is to target the d4 pawn. And pawn c3 was played. How does this work? Do I play queen b6 or knight c6? Because if I play immediate knight c6, it incentivizes him to play bishop e3. But if I start with queen b6 and he decides to play bishop e3, then there's a drawback and he blundered this pawn. And I'm also targeting the pawn on d4 twice. Usually it's good to just take the pawn and then play knight c6. And if I was white, I would just take on c5 here. And then after bishop takes, I develop normally. I like to play like this as white, especially when I'm playing against the French defense. Okay, fair enough. He plays queen to f4. If I take, he's probably going to take with the queen. It allows bishop c5 though. So I'm actually going to take. If he chooses to take with the pawn, then knight c6, and you guys know what we're doing already. We're playing the Caro-Kann. The goal is to target the d4 pawn. I'm also not seeing how he's going to protect the d pawn, because he's able to protect it with the bishop, but then there's a drawback. b2 will no longer be guarded. And knight e7 to f5, in case there's some magic and a piece teleported to protect the d pawn, then that's another way how you're going to be applying pressure to d4. Okay, so he plays b3. Guy played b3 because, he really wants a bishop on e3. The thing is, if I take, I'm threatening a fork. So even if he plays bishop e3 thinking he's pinning, knight c2 check is very strong. So yeah, that's just a pawn, buddy. Let's just grab the pawn. I could have also took with the queen, but yeah, could have took with the queen as well. Think here he needs to play bishop to d3 in order to not get forked, and then maybe he will be threatening bishop e3. He still played bishop e3. The thing about it is, knight c2 is a fork. I'm trying to see if there's a little tactic here, guys. Like, I'm thinking just check and then take the bishop, but another side of me wants to check and then after king over play d4, hit the bishop. Because then if the bishop move, I take the rook. And if I check king over and I play d4 and then the king takes, the king becomes a bit exposed. But I don't think I gain much because my development is not that good. So let's just check and then take the bishop. He needs to play king d1 though, or king d2. Like, if he does not attack my knight, then I'll just move my queen and his rook is going to be trapped. Or maybe even d4 still. Okay, so he did play king d1. We can't touch the rook since we lose the queen, so let's just take with check. And if he plays queen takes, trading the queen is fine. But whenever you see a good move, you look for a better one. If he does play queen takes, bishop c5, hit the queen, and win the pawn on f2. That's called a skewer, by the way. And his queen and his pawn will still be on the same line. Okay, it's a bit tricky. Because after bishop c5, ooh, I usually tell people if you have to move your queen away, or if you have to move any piece away, try to move it to a square where you at least attack something. But I think he could be in some trouble here. Like, he has to be so careful, bro. Like, the rook is unprotected. This pawn is soft. That pawn is about to die. My only weakness is g7. So I was a bit worried about queen here, followed by queen takes, but I don't think I should be worried about that. Okay. I mean, he attacks it anyways. Um, all right, guys. I'm seeing a little idea here. The king is exposed. The rook is unprotected. If I could get my queen on d4, that would be a 4. The trick to it is the moment he takes, my rook is dead. Which means if I takes and then he plays queen takes and I check, he moves the king. Well, not there. That's not where he's gonna put the king. Where is he gonna put the king? Here, check, king back, check, king up, maybe check. All right, that's too much calculation. I'm just gonna play knight e7. Like, let's just develop. The thing about this move is I'm still allowing him to take on g7, but if he takes on g7, I'll go rook to g8 and attack the queen because the knight guards the rook. And then after the queen takes, then I take on f2. And at that point, I will be, well, whoa, no, no, not taking on f2. If he takes and I play rook here and he takes bishop to d4, actually traps the rook. And for him to not lose the rook, he may have to sacrifice his knight. Okay, bishop e2. He didn't take the pawn, but he still lost the rook. I mean, bishop to d4. Not the rook. You don't have to lose the rook, but he's going to have to just give me the knight. And after I take the knight, then he tries to save the rook. I'm already ahead by a pawn, so now this is completely winning. Now I'm thinking about all the ways to trade the queens. Yeah, so he did sack the knight. We take the knight, hit the rook. Rook moves, and I'm already attacking this pawn once. So why not guard the bishop, attack it again? Oh no. Oh well, there's king here. I thought he was just mated or you had to sack. But there's king here. If he puts the king there though, I'll just put the rook on the same line as the king. And then eventually I may castle or just grab this pawn. But I'm ahead by so many points. I could do anything and win this game. So let's start by putting the rook on the same line as the king. Bishop b5 check is a bit annoying. I may have to move my king or just block with the knight. No, it's definitely annoying. It's fine though. I'm ahead by too much points. Okay. Okay. Tactic alert. I'm not seeing the tactic, but I need to be alert. Because my rook is on the same line as the guy's king. My bishop is in the way, which means there's this covered attacks. The thing is, anywhere I check him, the king is gonna go here. But if I check him here, and then the king goes here. I check him here, not taking the queen yet. Then after the rook takes, then I take the queen. Tactic alert. That's called that is covered attack, guys. And if you're trying to get your tactic good, just get my book, send the word book to this email. He moves the king. We simply grab the rook. And then once the rook takes, that's when we grab the queen. Very nice. Very, very nice. Now his rook is under attack. This pawn is under attack. There's a check here. I can always block with the knight. This is winning. Okay, check. Let's just block with the knight. Okay, let's just take. If rook takes, no, I'll castle. And oh my, oh no, no, no. I thought I missed mate. He resigns. More Caro Kann defense against 1100 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1100. Let's play some more Caro Kann defense. In knight f3, we play d5. And we have an exchange variation of the Caracan, which is very easy for us to develop. We just develop both knights. Like, I don't think it matters which knight is developed first. Just know that develop two of the knights, develop the bishop, and castle the king. Don't play e6 and block out your bishop. Develop the bishop to either f5 or g4 first. Either one of them is fine, to be honest. Just like the whole idea is you want to play e6, but you want to get the bishop outside of the pawn chain. He castled the king. Now we play e6. And the plan from here is bishop e6, castle a king, and we're doing fine. Rook is already on the same line as our king, but Caro-Kann is very, very solid. Like, there's nothing there. Let's go bishop to d6, and then I'll get my king out the center. Usually, I take on d4, and then after the queen, well, I take the knight, and then after the queen takes, I'm able to take on d4. But since there's a pin here, I'm just going to pull the bishop back, maintaining the pin. And who knows, maybe after I castle, I'll be able to do it. He gave up his bishop for the knight, though. Let's just take back. That's fine. Now we have the bishop here. He moves his queen. I guess he's trying to get out of this pin. And now I'll simply get my king out the center of the board. Knight back to e2. Knight is probably going here. Knight could also jump in here. So I'm going to use this opportunity to attack his queen. And because the queen is on the same line as this pawn, he has to be careful where he puts the queen. He has to ensure that he does not put the queen too far. Otherwise, he'll just lose the pawn. So he moves the queen to c3. Okay, queen and the rook is on the same line, which means if bishop b4 was possible, that would be nice. But he's also attacking my pawn on c6. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play queen b6. You see, innocent looking moves. I'm guarding the pawn on c6, but offense is the best defense. I'm also threatening to play bishop to b4, which would be a very nice cue, which he fell for. I'll say tactic alert, but you guys already know what the move is. The queen and the rook is on the same line. And what I want you guys to understand is how throughout this video, you're going to notice how I'm able to set up the tactic. So for the lower rated players, you're just making moves. The tactics pops up out of tin here. That's going to happen a lot. But if you want to be a good player, you have to be able to set up your own tactic. You have to be able to say, okay, I notice a tactical weakness in the opponent's position. Okay, boom. I need to get my pieces there. And that's basically what I did. Now he has to move the queen. I'll take the rook. And just like that, we have so much material. So now we simply take. If he trades first, there's two ways going about this. There's just taking back the queen. After he takes, I try to take this pawn. Or there's the in-between move, or the Zhujiangzhou, trying to take as much material as possible, taking on f2 with check. Now the king has to react to it, then I'll take the queen. And that gives us even more material. Now I'm ahead by 3 points. So he plays pawn c3, saw that the pawn was under attack. I need to get my rooks in the game. Usually it's good to go for pawn breaks when you're trying to get your rooks in the game, because pawn breaks basically helps you to trade pawns. And, once pawns are being traded, files are being opened. All right, tactic alert. Bishop to d6. Again, it's an attacking move, but remember, offense is the best defense. And you guys need to understand patterns. Pattern recognition is important. His bishop and his king is in a knight fork pattern. I hit him with this move, knight e4. I hit the king. I hit the bishop. We're now going to be ahead by 6 points. He resigns. More Kann defense against 1200 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1200. We are playing some more Kann defense. D4, we play d5. And we're seeing the exchange variation. Okay, bishop to d3, we just need to develop in the most normal, natural way. It's very easy development when they play the exchange. Pawn c3 guards the pawn. Now we have two of our knights develop. And there's actually a very cool line with h3 that I've seen many players play. And basically the idea is to ensure that the light squared bishop is not developed outside of the pawn chain. If they do play h3 though, because I haven't seen this and I used to teach this to my students as well, if they play h3, just play e5 and go after the center. Now he plays bishop to f4. I don't want to play e6 and block my bishop out. So I'm actually going to play bishop g4, even though there's not a knight there. If he plays f3, I don't care. This what I'm doing. Like anytime you put a bishop on g4 and it ends up on g6, or you're playing with the white pieces, it's called the bishop store. It's a cool way to trade your bad bishop for the opponent's good bishop. Then once we play e6, development becomes easy, and most importantly, we will not have any bad pieces. He puts the knight on f3 anyways, and then we play pawn to e6. One fear that I have, it's not a fear, it's just like a concern, and you should always have it. I mean, if you understand the drawback principle, anytime you're going to move your light squared bishop, just expect queen to b3 to attack your pawn because there's a drawback. And once you have very easy ways to defend the pawn, like usually b6 is not a good way to defend the pawn because it leaves your knight unprotected, but my guy's developing very well, very normally. Okay, let's just continue with development. Bishop d6, trade, get the king out the center of the board. He traded. Now we take back, and my goal is to castle. Now, I've said this many times. Okay, queen to b3 came. Queen to b3 did come. If I castle, he takes, rook b1, queen move. I'm able to take on b2. Do I want this though? Do I want this though? Okay, you know what? Let's just defend it. I'm just gonna pull the queen back to defend it, and then I'll castle my king. There's not much that he has here. It's a very equal position. I mean, both sides have been playing very well. He's also trying to eliminate my bishop, which I'm not gonna take. I'm gonna pull back. One of us needs the castle. If he plays g4, then he's going to be weakening his king, which is what he did. And from here, where's he going to get castle? If his king stays in the center, it's not good. If he castle on the king side, it's not good. And if he castle on the queen side, it's not good. So his king is going to be weak regardless. So that's good. For now, we're not able to punish it. We're just going to leave it be. He took. I'm now going to take. Remember, to take is a mistake, guys. You should only trade if it improves your position. Notice how he took and now my rook gets the open file, even though a lot of times we're just going to castle over there anyways. All right, so he castled. My king is usually not that unsafe in the center if these three pawns are just guarding the king, especially since my rook is already active here and I don't want to castle and just give him the attack. I want to at least try to start an attack first. My queen is on the same line as his king. So now I'm thinking about doing a pawn storm with a3, b5, b4, or rook to b8, b5, b4. Let's go with rook to b8, b5, b4. This is called a minority attack, by the way. There's a minority attack, there's a pawn majority type of attack. Basically means if you have less pawn than the opponent on one side, you roll them up the board. More pawn than the opponent on one side, you can also consider rolling them up the board. All right, his rook is on the same line as my king, so we need to start thinking about tactics. For example, pin pieces don't protect, and my pawn on e6 will not be guarding d5. So, for example, if he plays g5 and attack my knight, and I move the knight, he takes a free pawn. So this will be the time when I castle, allowing these attacks to come in. But what I'm basically seeing is this is one of those cases where the faster attack will win. It's like, okay, bro, you could start your attack on the king side. I'm going to start my attack on the queen side, and the player with the initiative will win this game. So let's see what happens. His attack has started, but his f4 square is actually really weak. I mean, I'm able to put my knight on the edge of the board. And remember, we do not put our knight on the edge of the board to keep them on the edge of the board. The edge of the board is just a route that you take. Anytime it's a scenario where your knight just stays on the edge of the board, you're doing something incorrect. I'm also noticing that his rook and his king is in a knight fork pattern. So if I put my knight on f4, that could be a potential fork. Tactic alert. Ha ha ha. You see, as soon as he made the move, I saw it. So what did I see? What did I see? First of all, you guys already spot the third most important tactical weakness, which is pieces on the same line. Come on. Because my queen is on the same line as his king, we're thinking about tactic. Another thing is pin pieces don't protect. With that being said, also remember, guys, I try my best to be repetitive. Like I do it on purpose so that way, anytime a tactic is there, you guys just automatically know what I'm going to say, and it's easier for you guys to find it. And that way, once you guys are playing your games, it's even easier for you guys to find it. It's a check, a capture, or a threat. I do not have any check. I have a capture here that does nothing, but this capture wins me a pawn. It also gains a tempo on his queen because the queen has to move, and just like that, we're ahead by a pawn. Okay, queen moves. Clearly, the queen is attacking my knight now. Not necessarily the pawn, but the queen. Let's just pull the knight back, though. I mean, it hits the queen. It applies pressure to the knight. If he takes with the knight, I take with the pawn. That applies pressure to the queen. And, usually when you play the Caracan, you win a pawn, you bring them in the end game, and then you win the game because your pawn structure in the Caracan is just going to be so solid. Like, you're rarely going to find yourself with any form of weak pawns, like any backward pawn, any isolated pawn, or anything like that. Your pawns are always going to be connected to each other. So another positional concept for you guys to learn: connected pawns are strong, disconnected pawns are weak. Okay, queen goes to c5, didn't do much. Knight f4 is just a nice score for the knight. Let's not keep the knight on the edge of the board for too long. That is still a potential fork because the king and the rook is still sitting in a knight fork pattern. Queen is the main defender, which means our goal from here is to try to chase away the queen. Okay, now he plays pawn h4, and since his queen is centralized, I have a very nice move here, guys. Like, can anyone explain why e5 is possible? If you're able to explain why e5 is possible, that's good. And to get the most out of my videos, I'm assuming your brain is on and you're not just turning off your brain watching videos. But since you already solved it, now I'll be able to play e5. And the answer is, even though he has two pieces on the square and I only have one piece on the square, if he takes with the queen is no longer guarding the d3 square, and then that's just going to be a knight 4 pattern. And if he takes with the rook, I'll scream on the top of my lungs, tactics alert. So I'm not expecting him to take. Tactics alert. Do you guys know what the move is? Okay, there's two type of people watching this video. There's the decent guy who is like, come on, bro, you know, let's look for moves on his half of the board. Let's look for checks. Knight d3 is a fork. After queen takes d3, we win the rook. I mean, okay, bro. Okay, you win some material. But then there are the killers who is like, whoa, the d3 square in itself is a knight fork pattern. I think this tactic is called attraction. We sacrifice the queen. How strong is that? It's a brilliant move. If it's not a brilliant move, then come on, has to be a brilliant move. Because once the queen takes, again, the d3 square is a knight fork pattern. And then just like that, instead of just being up on exchange, we're ahead by an entire rook. How am I so good at these tactics? Because I know all the possible tactical weaknesses in chess. Like once there's one of them, I'm able to spot them. There's actually 12 of these, and I actually wrote an entire book explaining all 12 of them, and I show you guys how to use them in your games. So if you want to grab a copy of that book, send an email with the word book to this email, chesswithakeem@gmail.com. Do we take the queen? I mean, let's just grab the queen, right? Oh, shoot. I almost pranked you guys by saying let's take here first, and then after the queen move, I grab the queen. But it would have been a blunder because he would have just grabbed the knight. So let's not be too fancy. Let's grab the queen. And from here, we're basically going for every single trade. I mean, we're ahead by a rook. Let's just trade everything off the board. Rook joins the game. Let's protect the knight first, since it also brings my other rook in the game. Oh no, I missed a tactic alert, man. Whoa, guys, look at this. Look at this. Look at this. The rook puts himself right there. I could have actually sacked my rook, and then after the king takes, I fork. And it's crazy because it's the thing that I just saw. And I just told you guys that I knew all of the tactic alerts and I missed it. It's slightly embarrassing, but only slightly. Let's go here, hit the rook, hit the pawn, going for some trades. And obviously, the moment he starts trading, we don't necessarily have to think to win this game. Like unless we blunder a fork or we just outright give the guy our rook, it's just gonna be such an easy game to win. I'm gonna take his pawns. The moment I create a pass pawn, I'll just start rolling it up the board. Okay, knight didn't do anything. Let's continue. Let's check the king, grab the pawn. Grab the pawn. I'm just trying to create a pass pawn here. Knight moves, we go here, grab this pawn, trying to roll the pawn up the board. King moves, didn't do anything. Now we grab the pawn and the plan becomes easy. We move the knight out the way and roll the pawn up the board. Pawn push, we move the knight out the way. I also just gave me the knight for free. Ah, poor guy. Poor guy. He resigns. More Huracan defense against 1300 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1300. We're playing some more Huracan defense. And I haven't really seen f4 a lot, but we're still going to be responding with d5. Like, our second move is always going to be d5. Okay, now he plays e5. So what I'm seeing is like some advanced variation where I usually play c5 whenever the pawn is on d4, but the pawn is not currently on d4. And bishop f5 could be played here. But let's just play c5. I'm still going to play c5 just to keep things simple and then put my knight on c6. And if by then he puts his knight on f3, which he immediately did, then my bishop goes to g4. I actually prefer my bishop on g4 rather than f5 because the f5 square is usually reserved for my knight. So whenever they play h3, I just give up the bishop for the knight and then I continue with my normal development. Let's go knight c6, pawn e6, knight e7, knight f5. Those are my ideas. All right, so knight c3, there's two attackers on my pawn. Let's just play e6 now though, just guarding the pawn, regular stuff. And this is where people usually get a bit confused, because the knight is not able to go to f6. But it's fine though, just put the knight on the f5 square. Maybe a bit tricky if we play knight f5 and he plays g4, but already I'm seeing some queen h4 check ideas. So I think black is just doing fine here. Okay, so now he's pinning my knight. Let's continue with the plan. Knight e7, also supporting my knight. In a lot of cases, I want to be able to play knight f5 as well. So what I'm thinking of is a knight on f5, a bishop on e7, and the king is castled. This is usually the typical setup that I go for. All right, so king is castled. Let's put the knight on f5. I don't mind him taking on c5 or c6. That gives up the bishop here. And my double pawns are not going to be weak. Knight goes back to e2. I'm assuming he's anticipating a knight going to d4 and attack his queen. And, he just don't want to allow that. But let's just develop normally. I'm not really afraid of g4 because, he's pushing pawns on the side that his king is on. I'm considering playing h5, trying to prevent g4. But I also need to keep in mind that I'm also trying to castle my king. Okay, now d3. Guess this bishop needs to join the game. Now we get the king out the center of the board. And the moment the king is out the center, it means my knight is no longer pinned. So I'm expecting him to just eliminate the knight here. So that's what he did. Now we take back. And now that I take back, I'm noticing that the B file is now a bit open, so I can always put my rook on the B file. Still, I'm not too afraid of G4. If G4, there's always knight D4. So far my position is pretty solid. B3, B3. I guess he wants to fianchetto the bishop. In some cases, I could go d4, knight e3. That would be a very strong knight. Okay, first let's put the rook on the file. Because if he puts the bishop here, and I eventually try to put my knight here, he can always just pull the bishop and attack the knight. So still I want to keep my options open. But if the bishop goes to b2, it will be unprotected on the same line as my rook. Okay, knight g3. Knight hits my knight. Trading is fine. But one thing I noticed that the knight no longer guards the d4 square. So I'm going to use that opportunity to centralize my knight, attack the queen. I'm also targeting the unprotected pawn on c2, which means he has to save the queen and not lose the pawn. So it has to be queen to d1 here. Queen f2 allows a pin. Okay, that I wasn't expecting. How's that not a pawn? Assuming he wants knight h5 threatening mate, I can always play g6. There's no way I'm not taking this pawn. That's just a pawn. Okay, if he plays f5 here, I have to be a bit careful because then if I take the rook, there's f6 and there's some high possibility of me getting checkmated. But we are ahead by a pawn. So now that we're ahead by a pawn, my goal from here is just to defend, like my life depend on it. And if he's not able to deliver a checkmate or find a checkmate, then the extra pawn could just bring him into the endgame and then convert. Okay, was expecting that. I think f5 would have been a bit stronger though. Now he's threatening a checkmate. I'll just play g6 to defend it. His knight is not necessarily under attack since this is pinned, but there's just no threats here. I mean, if f5 that's free, he really needed to play f5 from before. Maybe that could have even given him an advantage. Okay, so he decides to simply save the rook. Now my knight isn't doing much here. So might as well I just pull it back. And I can always put the knight on f5. Just put it back on f5. Now I'm just ahead by a pawn. Oof. There's no way that works though, bro. That's just a pawn. I have two pieces on the square. He only has one. So once I take and he takes, I'm just going to take back. So not really seeing what he saw. Maybe he's trying to say that his bishop could be very active on this diagonal, but I really just never, ever need to move my knight because I'm ahead by two pawns. So worst case scenario, if I have to give back some material, I'll still just be much better here. All right, since we're ahead in material, my goal from here is to start looking for some trades. So let's go queen f5, trying to get the queens off the board. I'm also targeting his unprotected pawn on d3. Okay, queen goes back. How do I make progress here? Maybe he wants g4. I'm going to play the prophylactic h5. I mean, it still doesn't really defend against g4 because he could still play g4. My rooks now needs to join the game, but being ahead by two pawns, I really don't need to do much. Like, the position is already winning. Rook is now on the file. That's a nice score for a rook. Hits the unprotected pawn. All right, so we're definitely in defensive mode now. Rook b5 takes, he takes. That's a pawn. I think he has to get back the pawn. I think that rook move was just really nice. And if I push this, my knight is unprotected. So since I have to lose the pawn, I'm going to go with rook to b5 and said, okay, if I have to lose the pawn, at least he has to give up back the bishop. The good thing is I'm still going to be ahead by a pawn, even though the pawns are going to be doubled. So it's still slightly tricky, but just slightly. This rook needs a file. Let's put it on the b file for the time being. It's not a major piece endgame, so we have to be very careful. There's no back rank mates. I'm gonna play like a lot of waiting moves here now, like maybe king g7, pawn h4, maybe queen back to f6. But if by some reason he allows me to get access to the c file, then I'm good. What I'm noticing though is his queen is doing a defensive role, guarding this pawn. Okay, he goes on the file. Maybe he wants to check. Let's just move forward. Nothing is wrong with making waiting moves, guys. Like, if you have a good position, and when I say waiting move, like, as long as it does not put your position in any detriment, like you're not committing to any move. For example, a king to g6. Now he swing his rook is king over. I can also play a h4, which changes the position. But I know that if he tries to attack my pawn, I can always just pull the queen back. Now he plays rook f3. I'm assuming he wants to move his queen away, but he wants to keep this pawn guarded. And my goal from here now is just to try to get rid of this rook. So let's play rook here. The thing is, he has used up so much of his time playing really good moves. But in a 10-minute game, bro, time is like a huge factor. Okay, he's attacking my pawn. Now would be the time where I would love to get one of my rooks on the c file. Still not possible, though. Still not possible. Let's just guard my pawn. If he puts his queen here, I don't really mind. I mean, I'm guarding f7 pretty well. But this guy's playing some chess. I'm not really seeing how I'm going to make a lot of progress here. But the guy just has no time on the clock. Okay, now I'll pull the queen back. If he takes, I'll trade and then get access to the c file. Okay, now we trade, get access to the c file. That's what I wanted. But in return, I'm down by a pawn. Okay, how do I get to his king? He's rolling his pass pawns up the board. This check doesn't really do much. I mean, after king up, like, I'm trying to see if there's any possible way I can get my queen on the background. Let's try pulling the queen back here. Maybe here, here, then here. Have to be creative. So pawn push. Okay, I have an idea. Check him here and then put my queen here. He's not able to push his pass pawn. He pushed that one instead. If I'm able to just teleport my queen to this square, that's going to be a checkmate. So that's my plan right now. I have to look out for any perpetual checks that he may have, though. Okay, queen here is one move. Okay, he rolls the pass pawn. Now once I hit him with this move, we got the plan. He has no checks, and there's no way in which he could prevent a checkmate. So he pushed the pawn, and that's just a checkmate. More Huracan defense against 1400 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1400. Let's hit him with some Huracan defense. All right, so d4, we're playing d5. Knight c3, we take. They take, we play knight f6. We're playing the Tartakower variation of the Caro-Kann. Guess we're not going to be seeing any alien gambit. Yeah, once they take, we take with the e-pawn, so that way the bishop gets free development. And a lot of them play knight f3. It's not theoretically correct to have the knight on f3, but hey, we know the setup for our pieces. Like, we know exactly where we're going to be putting our pieces. Bishop goes to d3. We get working out the center of the board. He got his king out the center. And now I'll play knight to d7. Knight d7, he plays h3. Fair enough. We get the rook on the file. Rooks needs files. This guy's playing very quickly. Maybe he plays this line many times, but I also play this many times with black. We know where the pieces belong. Knight goes to f8, keeping the pawn guarded. Eventually, the knight could come to g6. a3, I don't. a3, I don't get. I mean, c4, I'd understand, but a3, I don't get. Maybe he wants b4, but let's just develop our pieces normally here. c4, I understand. Eventually he wants to play d5. Let's play queen d7. And this is the typical setup, guys. And the bishop takes h3 sacrifice is now lurking in the air. Now, pawn c5 is not good, because once I pull the bishop back, for one, the pawn on d4 becomes a weak backward pawn. And two, even though the d5 square is my square, I get very easy access to the d5 square. Okay, now the rook goes to e8. The sacrifice usually does not work if they're able to easily just pull their bishop back to f1 and just attack the queen. So when in doubt, just ensure that all the pieces are active. This is the only piece not doing anything. Let's swing the rook on the open file. Now all our pieces are active. Then he puts the queen on c2. The thing about this is the queen is not guarding the knight. So if I consider sacrificing now, there's no immediate bishop f1. He has to ensure that he's not losing the knight. Let's say he guards the knight. Oh, wait. I mean, does it work though? I'm able to swing the rook to d5 and then try to swing the rook over to h5. Like that would be my idea. There's knight g6, but it gives him the chance to take or even go bishop f1. All right, let's do some calculation here, guys. This is not a tactic alert. It's just calculating. Takes, takes, takes. I'm expecting a queen or a bishop to be on e2 at that point. I do not have any mate or anything, but I do have rook to d5. And in a lot of cases, rook to g5 becomes a move because if he takes with the knight, that's mate, and if he takes with the bishop, he loses the queen. But let's assume that the bishop is on e2 and we play rook d5. So takes, 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 bishop e2. The check is just going to tell him to run with the king. Maybe we repeat the position and then try to. Okay, then we play rook e4. Yeah, that's too many active pieces. And this is why I tell you guys, rooks do need files. You're not going to find tactics if you do not have file to put your pieces on. So now we take on h3. Maybe it's a tactic alert. These types of tactic in my book, I call them sacrifice to expose the enemy king. Come on, bro, man. I needed a good game, but he just blundered it away. It's fine though, guys. He just blundered it away. Now the knight is just hanging. This is usually how we defend against the sacrifice, but he's unaware that I'm able to just take on h3, and that's just free piece. Is there a way for me to checkmate him though? Like check king takes check king up, or check king over? No, check king goes here, check king over check, king here. That's not mate because of the queen. I'm going to still take with the bishop though because it's a very high possibility, or it's easier for me to swing my rooks into the game. So the king move, I check him here, the king move. Somebody's going to leave a comment telling me that I missed something. I just know it. I check him here, the king takes, I play rook here. How on earth is he going to prevent rook h5 mate? Because I'm not missing anything today. I check him. The king has to take. We swing the rook in the game. That's called a rook lift. There's no preventing rook to h5. And that's going to be leading to a checkmate. That's how we calculate. That's how we find tactic. If you're also trying to do this, you know the drill. Send me an email to get my book to chesswithakeem@gmail.com and just send the word book or, whatever you want to say. We play rook to d5, and this is leading to a checkmate. Pulling the king back to g1 does not help. I'm still going to play rook h5. How is he going to prevent rook h1 now? Resign, maybe? He resigns. More Caro Kann defense against 1500 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1500. We're doing some more Caro Kann defense. So they go d4, we go d5, and now we're seeing knight c3. Whenever they play knight c3, we take on e4. We know this. A knight takes e4, we play knight f6, and it's basically saying, hey, it's fine. You could play the alien gambit if you want. I'll take the free knight. Or if they take on f6, we just play the regular, solid Tartar call. Okay, so he decided to play knight takes f6, so we're seeing a Tartar call. Let's play e takes f6, and now we know how development happens from here. The bishop goes to d6, we castle the king. When I play against the Tartar call, this knight usually goes to e2, to be honest. Now he plays c3, and we're going to get the king out the center of the board. Now, putting the bishop on d3, and that's the reason why this knight goes to e2, because now I'm able to play rook to e1. Like anytime you're able to swing your rook to the open file and check the king, it doesn't matter what opening you're playing, it doesn't matter what color you're using, it's always good. So he blocks with the bishop, and I'm not going to rush, playing bishop f4, trying to apply pressure to the bishop. I'm going to go knight d7 first because usually they try to apply pressure to h7. So it's kind of important that we just have the knight sitting on the f8 square so that way it guards h7 and eventually it can join the game to on e6. From here, the light squared bishop usually goes to e6 or g4 depending on what's happening in the position. Since this bishop is able to go back to f1 easily, then okay, I'm not. Let's see. Bishop to g4, h3, bishop h5, or just regular bishop to e6. With the bishop on e6, there's ideas of playing pawn to b5 followed by bishop to d5. So those are the two things that I'm basically contemplating here. Let's just choose to play bishop to e6. This is basically the setup that you guys could basically take a screenshot in your mind. If you get to this setup, you're doing fine because all the minor pieces are developed. The king is castled, and after like one move, the rooks are going to be connected. It's usually the queen going to c7, swinging the rook over to d8, or the queen going to d7, swinging the rook over to d8. But, you guys could see how we're just trying to follow regular principles here. And then he still decides to play this pawn to h3 move. And because he plays pawn h3, I'm going to choose to put the queen on d7. There's no ideas of me sacrificing on h3. Now, there's two things that you guys need to keep in mind. One, obviously, you need to know the sacrificial idea on h3. And two, you need to know when it works, when it doesn't work. You need to know what are the different ways in which white could defend against these. And one of the best ways in which white defend is after the sacrifice, white is able to just pull the bishop back to f1, attack the queen, and then once the queen moves, they fianchet to the bishop. And you know that it's kind of hard to checkmate someone's king if they have a fianchetted bishop there. So once the idea of bishop f1 is there, I'm more than likely not going to sack. If the bishop is not able to go back to f1, then that's when I will more consider sacrificing. And another thing to just let you guys know is putting the knight on h2 kind of allows the sack. I mean, I'm not sure if it works, but it basically makes the sack come with tempo. Because after takes, takes, queen takes, I'm now automatically attacking the knight. The issue is knight back to f1 seems to be fine. If I'm able to get the knight on, let's say, h4 at that point, then it would be fine. But the moment I play, let's say, knight g6, he's going to take. And I will not have enough pieces in the attack. So let's just use this time to get the knight in the game. Again, this is usually what we do with the b8 knight, d7 to f8, guard h7, eventually comes to g6. And it can always go to h4 or f4. If they take, we get the pawn cube and everything here is fine. Queen to f3 would be a nice move, I'm assuming, because then it prevents the sack, unless knight h4 is just nice. Okay, knight comes into g4. What does that do? There's no good forward moves for that knight on g4, but we're no longer able to sacrifice. I can always just put my knight on the h4 square though. I mean, I'm basically allowing him to play g3. So I don't want to be too hung up on that sacrifice. So f5 is always going to be an idea. Knight goes back, and then f4 hits the bishop. Bishop goes back. All right, yeah, there's definitely a lot of attacking plans that I have here. Which one do I choose though? You know what? Wait. Yeah, when in doubt, let's just bring the pieces in the game, bro. Like my rook on a8 is not doing anything. At least now it's on a file. Now I can always say every single piece that I have is active. The threat is better than the execution. So I'm thinking about knight h4, pawn f5 to f4, even moving my queen to c7, so that way I'm able to control this diagonal. And whenever eventually once I play this f5 move, his knight would be forced to go to e5 and win me a pawn. Like those are everything that I'm considering here. All right, now we're seeing c4, which means there's no more bishop d5 ideas. Guess he wants to play c5. I'm not really afraid of c5 because it weakens the d5 square. I'm going to go with this idea, knight h4. The knight is unprotected. It's on his half of the board. If he plays g3, I could say that I'm forcing him to push a pawn on the side that his king is on. So his pawn on h3 is also going to be unprotected. I mean, he will be gaining a tempo on my knight, but I can always just put the knight on f5 and just attack his bishop. So I really don't mind if he plays g3. Let them push the pawn on the side that their king is on. And we got the pawn push. We're not able to jump in since the queen covers the square. So the knight automatically goes to f5 here, targeting the bishop. Not expecting him to move the bishop because that pawn could be hanging, even though the knight will be unprotected here. There's always some bishop to b4 ideas which attack the rook as well. So now it's just a regular game, to be honest. There's also sacrificial ideas on g3, which is why he puts the king on g2. All right. And just like that, guys, just like that, we say tactic alert. Tactic alert. It's a cute little tactic. It does not win much, but hopefully you guys are able to see the tactical weaknesses in his position. Now, what I'm seeing is, well, based on his last move, the king goes to g2 guarding h3. But what I notice is my queen and my bishop forms a battery towards h3. This is also focal point. That one is important as well. And because of that, that's why I'm going to play the move pawn to h5 here. You notice what that does? It basically chases away the knight from the diagonal. Now, the knight doesn't really have a lot of squares. I'm assuming the knight is going to go to, let's say, h3. Or even if he eliminates my bishop, it's the same thing. The knight still has to move. And then just like that, we are going to be winning the pawn on h3. So It's not anything huge, but if you really want to be a strong player, notice this guy's 5096. It's he's a good player, he's calculating stuff. But the stronger players, they are able to punish the slightest weaknesses in the position, which is why you also need to be able to understand structural weaknesses. Even if it's a weak square, you need to be able to punish it. So the knight goes back to h2. We take on e3 with check, which means now he has to react to it. Doesn't matter if he takes with the rook or the pawn, then that's when we're going to take on h3 and we simply win a pawn. And just to let you guys know, these are the types of tactics that you're going to be able to find, once you get my book. My book is now available. And if you want a copy of my book, just send the word tactic to the email that you're seeing on screen. So he took with the pawn. Now we take with check. He has to ensure that the king also guards his g3 pawn. And just like that, we're now attacking his king. The king was not guarding the g3 pawn. He pulls the king back, which just gave us even more material. It's tricky though, because then if I take here, he takes here. And I do not believe there's a threat. Like, he's attacking me on h7, but I just don't believe there's a threat. I will take that rook, bro. And after the queen check, I'm gone. I'm just gone. If the queen check again, I'm gone. So I take the rook, the queen check, I'm gone. He takes back the rook. And I mean, it's material, slightly risky, but it's material at the end of the day. We're up two. If he takes the pawn, eventually we're gonna be up three defending, but it's up three at the end of the day. And because he has no dark squared bishops, I'm seeing myself running all the way to c7. This is also a little defensive technique that you guys need to learn. Sometimes it's not just about, oh, I need to defend my king. Sometimes you just need to just run away from your problems. He moves the rook. Okay. Rook and the queen is now on the same diagonal. There is no bishop g4 since he has knight takes. And if I try to eliminate the knight first, he's going to simply play rook takes. But then e3 is going to be left hanging. So if I takes rook takes, I'm able to take on e3. At that point, the queen is still able to take on h5. No, because the bishop is going to be hanging. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then even though my bishop is going to be hanging, I don't care. Or maybe I should. I don't want to get mated. Let's calculate it. So rook takes, there's queen takes, check. And then there's just too many attacking pieces for that king to survive. Like, he's threatening mate, but I think he's going to be getting checkmated first. Like, I really hope that you guys calculate this, But let me just calculate it once more. If I takes, he's not going to play king takes due to this. So after rook takes, there's a drawback. This is left unprotected. I'm able to take on e3. And then after the queen takes, hits my bishop, threatening these ideas. I eliminate the bishop. Now, after the rook takes, he's threatening mate. I take here with check. At that point, I can also just take his rook because my rook is going to be here. So I'm really just chilling. Now, this is also me calculating, by the way, guys. It's also important that your calculation is important. There's basically three different versions of the book. There's the foundation, there's the intermediate, and there's the advanced. In the advanced, that is where you need to start working on your visualization and your calculation. In the foundation, that is basically where you just need to be able to spot the tactical weakness. If you're able to spot the tactical weaknesses, you're going to be finding tactics. In the intermediate, you need to be able to spot the tactical weaknesses and then stack the tactical weaknesses, which means you need to be able to spot more than one tactical weaknesses at the same time, So that's basically how you're going to be growing yourself as a very strong tactical chess player. So he took the pawn, I take the pawn, and just like that, we're now ahead by 3. But guess what? We already calculated all of this. The queen took, he's now threatening h7. Didn't really consider what happens if I check him here. But the king is just going to move in the corner. So let's just eliminate the bishop. Now we're ahead by 5. And if he decides, oh my God, I didn't see this, guys. I actually did not see this. If you guys saw that you notice what just happened? I had visualization issues. And this is why, stronger players are stronger than decent players. Because I needed to see that it was kind of luck. It's fine if he played rook takes. I mean, this still works. But I also needed to see this. Now I'm up 5. He's also trying to trade. I mean, this is just completely winning. Also, another tactic alert, guys. I can always just trade the rooks. Maybe he's going to resign here. But notice how the queen is the main defender of the rook, which is why once I play the move queen takes d4 check, I check the king. But now I have 3 pieces attacking that rook, which means that rook is completely dead, which means we're about to see some checkmating stuff. He decides to block with the rook. We take this free rook with check. Everything is crumbling down. The king moves out the way. Let's not miss a checkmate in one. That's another free rook with check. The king now has to take. Let's not miss a checkmate, guys. I know you guys love to tell me that I missed the checkmate. Now we check here. That's a queen, but there's no way I should take that queen. I'm gonna have checkmate. Whenever you see a good move, look for a better one. And that's just a checkmate. More Huracan defense against 1600 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1600. We're going to be playing some more Huracan defense. So d4, we play d5. Now we're seeing knight c3. They always like to take on e4. And then after they take with the knight, I simply play knight f6. And this guy is taking on f6, not playing the alien gambit. Let's just play e takes f6. And now we're seeing knight f3. And from this position, it becomes very easy for us to finish our development. We can always finish our development by not really moving a lot of pawns. Bishop c4, we simply get the king out the center of the board. And then from here, my plan is to get this knight to the f8 square. With the bishop on c4, though, I have to be on the lookout for a queen coming to the f7 square. So before I play rook to e8, let's actually play... No, let's actually go bishop to g4. Because at least now I can pull the bishop back to g6 if I have to. So pawn h3, we pull the bishop back, maintaining the pin. And then I can always go knight d7, even though usually what I do is I put the knight on f8 first. So I'm just trying, I wasn't moving the rook because I was aware of c3, queen b3, targeting f7. But now that my bishop guards f7, I can always play rook e8. But let's finish our development first. All right, so bishop goes to e3. Now we connect to our rooks. We're 11 moves in the game. Our rooks are connected. All the minor pieces are developed. So from here, it's time to start thinking about our attack. Okay, he also got his rook on the file. All right, how are we going to do this? Okay, let's get to our rook on the file. I think all he needs to do if he wants to simplify is to try to trade both rooks on the e file. I mean, he's playing with the white pieces, so it wouldn't be the correct thing for him to try to simplify. But I mean, I'm a higher rated player, so I'm assuming he would be happy with a draw. Bishop goes back. Didn't really do much. That didn't really do much. Maybe he wants c4. So let's have a look on the position, guys. I have no tactic. Whenever you're playing or you don't have any tactic, you're not really seeing any tactical ideas, just remember to follow the principle of the least active pieces. Find the piece that is not doing anything and just try to put it on a better square. So rook to d8 is an idea, or doubling up the rooks is also an idea. I think both of these are ideas. I'm going to go with doubling up the rooks, and then maybe eventually I'll consider playing c5. Okay, bishop goes back to c2. I'm assuming some queen to d3 ideas is coming very, very soon. I mean, if you do that, there's always knight f8 or bishop g6. So I'll just continue with my plan with doubling up the rooks. d5, d5. Okay, wasn't expecting d5. d5 is kind of weird. I mean, my pieces are now getting access to the e5 square. And automatically, I'm thinking about playing knight e5 and apply pressure to his pinned knight. If knight e5, I think he has to play g4, and that exposes his king a bit. Now, after takes, queen takes, I will be forced to move my bishop. I don't think I get too much from that. It's one of those scenarios where I don't necessarily have to rush. So let's just play c5 so that way none of his pieces get access to d4. And eventually, I would want to put something on the e5 square. Well, he played g4 anyways. I mean, I'm now forced to pull my bishop back to g6. And if he trades, we get the infamous pawn cube. Like, once you have the pawn cube, then your king is just gonna be safe. Like, your king will just always be safe. Pawn c4, he's just solidifying his chain. Rook e4 attacks the pawn. I like the idea of playing g5 here, though. Like, usually you don't push the pawns on the side that your king is on, but I have so many pawns in front of my king. My idea is I'm thinking about trying to get the knight on the f4 square, or maybe just leave the knight on g6 for the time being. Try to play bishop to f4. This game may go in an endgame, but in terms of pawn structure, I think his pawns are going to be a bit more vulnerable to attack than my pawns. But, that's kind of like the whole point of the Caro-Kann. Okay. Now he's connecting his rooks. Fair enough. Fair enough. I need to... Now I'm going to start thinking about maneuvering the knight. So the goal is to get the knight to the g6 square, then to the f5 square. Or maybe I'm going to put my bishop on the square and then take with the knight. But there's definitely a lot of weaknesses in his position. Like, he's not lost or anything, but it's harder for him to spot weaknesses in my position, and it's easier for me to spot weaknesses in his position. Ooh, that's a very ambitious pawn sacrifice. If I take that pawn, pawn c5 is very strong. And if the moment I move my bishop, he forks. So what my opponent is actually seeing here is my queen and my rook is in a pawn fork pattern. That's not a bad vision at all. But that's fine. Let's just play b6. Let's not get greedy. I also need to be aware that the guy has a pass pawn, but it's very well blockaded. Usually they say it's usually best to blockade the opponent's pass pawns with your minor pieces, because once you use your minor pieces are still going to be active and it's blockading the pawn, even though the best minor piece to use to blockade the pawn is usually a knight. All right, so he took. Let's take back. If the bishop takes, I'm going to take, and I'm assuming the end game that we predicted will happen. He's going to have a pass pawn, but his c4 pawn is a backward pawn. His h3 pawn is a backward pawn. His king is a bit exposed. Like, that's what I'm currently seeing. All right, he took. Let's take back. Rook to e1, I'm assuming. Yeah, he's going to really try to simplify this position. Okay, yeah, he's definitely going for the simplifications. All right, if I takes, knight takes, it's not too bad. It's going to be a bit harder for me to win. I'm thinking about playing rook c2, just keeping pieces on the board, threatening this pawn. If he plays rook to c1, then he's putting himself in a defensive position. So I definitely like that. What I'm afraid of is rook e8. Not seeing how he's going to apply pressure to my pinned knight, though, but definitely a bit worried. Definitely a bit worried. Takes, pawn push, maybe check and then go over, but yeah, I'm definitely a bit worried about that. All right, let's just go to the end game. It's fine. I'm very worried about his pass pawn. Now I'm gonna try to get my knight to the f4 square, but then he gets his knight to the d3 square, which prevents my knight from getting to the f4 square and attack my queen. This guy. All right, guys, we have to be active. Let's go queen d4. If the queen is behind the pass pawn, that's not too bad. Pawn to c5 is definitely a move, because if I take this pawn, then he pushes, and then I may lose the game. Nah, I mean, not really, because if he push a knight takes, then I win the pawn, and if queen takes, I win the knight. So we can't get access to the f4 square anymore unless I play something like queen e4, pin the knight first, then knight f4. I'm considering some knight h4 ideas, trying to get the knight on f3. It's not the easiest position to play, guys, but we're now in the end game. You guys know the end game drill. It's attack weak pawns, push past pawns, activate the king. With queens on the board, activating the king is going to be a bit risky, because there's going to be a bunch of annoying checks. But we still have to keep that in mind. Okay, knight goes here, guarding this. Knight c6 could be an idea, but then he's giving up control over the f4 square. So now my knight gets access to f4, and I'm also targeting his unprotected pawn on h3. Maybe he wants to fork here, but I don't think I should be afraid of it. I'm kind of afraid of it, but I don't think I should be. So he went for the fork. If I take with check, didn't we just get him? That's a check, blood. So I take with check. If king up, that's a check, which means he has to play something like king h2. And then I take. How fast is the pass pawn? Let's say he pushes. Can I mate him before? Wait, check king takes doesn't work. Knight back threatens mate. I mean, it doesn't seem too bad. This is called this is danger levels, by the way, guys. He attacks the queen. I take the pawn, and then this pawn on g4 becomes hanging. So the king now has to go to h2 if he wants to keep some initiative. Because if he goes to g2, I take with check. But now my only worry is how strong his pass pawn is. But I definitely think we got him here. Queen takes, knight f4 is the plan. And then I'm going to be threatening queen h3, queen g2. His pawn is 3 moves away from queening. Okay, so the king moves. That's also a pawn. I didn't give... let's not blunder the queen. Let's just take the pawn. Let's not blunder the queen. If he checks, I move. Queen here is very interesting. Takes, knight takes. My knight is under attack. Pawn push, there's king over though. I think I'm fine. We're just ahead by 2 clean pawns. Not sure how clean it is because he has the pass pawn. But if he allows knight f4, then it's very clean. Okay, so check was played. I don't want to go here because I want to keep the initiative. So I'm thinking about going here. Pawn push guards the knight. Yo, what if he pawn push and I check takes check, king up, check, king up, check, king takes, check. How's that not leading to mate? Okay, I definitely need my king in the action. Let's hit the knight. If pawn push, I can always just go knight f4. That was the initial plan. Queen to f5. I'm not afraid of queen to f5 because my king is also just marching over to the pass pawn anyways. Okay, he did play queen f5. Check, there's king takes. I think I'm just gonna take. And then after knight takes, I pull my knight back. Like there's no way I'm gonna lose this game being ahead by so many pawns. That's also another pawn. If you push, nah, let's not get too greedy now. I need the knight to at least be able to stop the pawn. Because if his pawn gets here, my king can't even approach it. And if I have to run my king to this direction, he may be able to take my pawn on g7. Okay, knight d6, knight to c8 will be a fork. It's not much I can do about that though, to be honest. Unless I'm able to target this pawn. So for example, knight d3 hits this, knight here. Yeah, this has to be fine. Yeah, we're in the end game, guys. The reason why we attack pawns in the end game is because we don't want to attack pieces, because the pieces are just so mobile. And obviously, there's no way to like try to checkmate the opponent's king or anything. But we also don't want to trade too many pawns. But this is just one of those cases where I have to lose this pawn, so I want to just get back a pawn in return. So I play knight e5, not taking this. And then if he takes the pawn, I take the pawn. I'm blockading his pawn. I have 4 versus 1 on the king side. Yeah, no, I'm just very confident that this is winning because this is not a pass pawn, but it's also an isolated pawn. So I may also just win that pawn. All right, knight goes to b5 to get the king active. Talk about this a lot, guys, but remember, we do not want to rush the endgame. So he's trying to activate his king. I'm going to hit him with f5, ensuring that there's not much forward moves for his king. King here, I'll go. I want to go here. I just know that he's not gonna trade though, so I don't know. Maybe I'm just wasting my time. There's a check here. King goes here. So I'm actually gonna put my knight here. So that way when I check him here, there's no forward moves for the king. And since it's a 4 versus 1 majority, if I'm able to trade one of the pawns, then I'm gonna be left with 3 pass pawns on the king side. So pawn push. Usually we don't want to trade pawns. Takes, king up. There's no checks from the knight. And then pawn to g5. And the pass pawns will be rolling. Okay, that move didn't do much. Now all we're doing is rolling our pass pawns. Like, especially since my knight covers some very important squares, this is just a matter of rolling the pass pawns up the board. I don't think I need the third pawn as well. I think my knight, my 2 pawns, and my king on their own can win this game. Okay, knight comes in, assuming he wants to check. Let's keep rolling the pawns. If I push, he's gonna take. So I think I'm gonna have to leave the pawns there for now. Knight here, there's king up. Knight here hits the pawn. King takes push. There is king back. Knight back hits the knight. There's a check and then take. King up. Let's just activate the king. It's fine. Only thing I'm worried about is him attacking this pawn. Um, okay, do I just sack that pawn? There's always knight c4 and then check him here. But what if I just play king up, knight takes check? Yeah, let's just play king up. I think I have enough pieces to actually sacrifice this pawn and checkmate his king. So we check him here. If this does not lead to mate, I'm going to be in trouble, but it will. Or I'm at least going to queen. Because once I check him here, he can't go here due to mate with king g3. So he has to put his king here. Okay, he did put his king here. Now he's gonna be checkmated by a pawn. Like once I go here, there's nothing he could do. I could even pre-move f2. So he pushed the pawn, and that's just a checkmate. More Huracan defense against 1700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1700. More Caracan defense coming your way. So pawn d4, we go d5. What shall we see? Advance, exchange, knight c3. Maybe it's going to be a Tartakow. Maybe it's going to be the aggressive alien gambit. Okay, Tartacore it is. I mean, I naturally play this with the white pieces, and as you guys could see, this is actually the very, very theoretical stuff that my opponent is doing. Usually, when you see people play against the Caracan and they play knight f3, they're not 100% sure or certain or know the theory. When they play c3, this is like a sign that they know the theory. So here we play bishop to d6. White's plan from here is to put a bishop on d3, put a queen on c2, and target the pawn on h7. So here I just need to get my king out the center of the board. But then he decided to play knight e2 first before playing queen c2. I don't think it matters too much because if I play rook e8, he could still play queen e2. So everything is going to transpose eventually. Let's just go rook to e8 here. Or maybe he's going to castle and just play it without playing queen c2, which should also be fine. The thing is, okay, I'm not really sure what's the thing. Knight d7, queen c2. I know that the theoretical idea is to, just roll the h pawn up the board. But, there's also times when the h pawn could just be overexerted pawn. So I can always just play knight f8. Yeah, this is basically where I'm at now. So why did he not play queen c2 before? Because now he's giving me the option of just playing knight f8, and I basically don't need to play h5. I think playing h5 is just a very aggressive response, though, to be honest. Not 100% sure if I should play h5, h4, go with the same idea, or just put the knight on f8. I think just putting the knight on f8 is good because the knight belongs on the f8 square anyways. I don't see why I would play h5 then put the knight on f8. Like, maybe it's not going to be one of those aggressive games where I attack the king. So let's try to not waste any time. In the future, if I want to play h5, that should still be possible. Okay, bishop comes to f4. And that, my fellow viewers, is our first tactic alert. So it's currently Black's turn to play. I like to say the exact same thing after a tactic alert so that way you guys know how to think. So obviously, first thing you need to do is to spot the tactical weakness in the position. What is attacking what is defending what are the weaknesses? And after you do that, then you need to start thinking about how do I choose the move? What do I look for? And this is where you start looking for the moves that you can play on the opponent's half of the board. And these are usually the checks, the captures, and the threats. So the tactical weakness that I'm seeing is he basically puts his bishop on f4, but the knight on e2 is the only defender of the bishop. That's what a tactical weakness. Because the knight is the only defender of the bishop, okay, fine. Do we have a check? No. We're looking on moves on the opponent's half. Do we have a capture? Yes, we do have a capture. We could take the bishop. But that's not a tactic. He's just going to take back. But because we know that the knight is the only defender of the bishop, that's why we eliminate the knight hand. We are sacrificing our rook, but just for you guys to understand, I'm going to be winning 1 point from this tactic. When you play against stronger opponent, you're not going to just checkmate their king or just find this massive tactic that wins the game. It's usually small, little win. So this was my first win. We managed to get 2 minor pieces for the rook. And by getting the 2 minor pieces for the rook, I'm going to have a better middle game because I'm basically just going to have more pieces. And if I didn't play knight f8, this wouldn't have been possible because queen to e4 would have hit my unprotected bishop and my focal point on h7. So thanks to this knight f8 move, I was able to do that. Please be aware of your own weaknesses as well. I know that my bishop is unprotected. I'm not going to be a coward and pull the bishop back. Let's finish our development first. So I'm going to play the move bishop e6, just finishing my development, just staying aware that my bishop is unprotected because only having one weakness in my position does not guarantee that the opponent is going to have a tactic. Usually when there's more than one weaknesses, that's when tactics starts to arise. And bishop c4, I wasn't expecting him to trade, because he's down in material. I don't have to be the one who make the capture though, guys. Remember, to take is still a mistake. I'm thinking about either queen d7, queen c7, or queen d6. This has nothing to do with this. Like, let him take. Let him take so my knight gets the square. I'm just considering where do I actually put my queen. And I think it's c7 because putting my queen on c7, it's a slight temper. Maybe not really because he's able to play g3 and defend against his attack on his h2 focal point. But at least I'm weakening his light squares. It's a bargain. I'm weakening his light squares. He plays h3 instead of playing g3, which means he did not take the tempo. And at this point, I can always play rook to e8, just swinging my rook in the game. Do I like rook to e8? Okay, maybe it works. Knight takes, rook takes. I think getting this game into the end game is going to be better since I have the 2 pieces and he has 1. But I also think just holding on to the bishop here is a nice idea. Now, because I do not have any tactic, it has to be a rook move because it's the least active piece. So let's just swing the rook on the file. Remember, guys, if you do not have any tactic, all you need to do is put your pieces on squares where you do get tactic. You're not going to have a tactic with your rook if it's pointing toward your own pawn. You're not going to have a tactic with a bishop pointing towards its own pawn because rooks needs files and bishop needs open diagonals. So he took with the bishop. I can always take and just go to the end game. But let's just take with the knight, keeping more pieces on the board, keeping my options open. Pawn g3, I will not sacrifice. I'm just going to pull the bishop back because, this is really just going to go to an endgame. I think having the two pieces for the rook is just going to be an endgame grind. It's not going to be an easy win, but I think black has way more chances or just an easier play or easier time to win this game. Now he plays pawn c4. That is not a free pawn because my rook is pinned down unprotected. Pawn c4 really weakens the d4 pawn though. Like he knows that I can't take. He wants to play d5 and apply pressure. But the moment I play rook to d8, now we don't want the rook on e8. We want the rook on d8. And now I'm attacking a pawn twice that he's guarding 0. How is he not going to lose that pawn? Okay, rook guards the pawn. Nice move, because if I try to take the pawn, I'm checkmated on the background. Remember, guys, please ensure that you know what your weaknesses are, not just the opponent's weaknesses. Eventually, I think he's going to play d5. d5, I would love to jump my knight into the d4 square. Fortunately, that's just not going to be possible. Pawn g6, I like. I mean, why not? I also need to create loft for my king. It's called loft. Once you play one of these pawn moves, especially once you're playing against the rooks and there's a lot of possibilities for open files pointing towards your king, you definitely need to push one of these pawns to create loft for your king. So now I'm attacking the pawn twice. He's guarding it once. Pawn to d5 will still be annoying because then he's going to have this pass pawn rolling up the board. I do not have to take though, but I want to take because even though it's a pass pawn, it's also an isolated pawn. So let's just take. My only issue is where does my knight belong? I do not want my knight to be too passive. So I'm heavily considering the c5 square. I mean, he's just going to attack the knight again, though. I don't want him just chasing my knight around the board. That's the thing. But he took with the rook. He did take with the rook. Not bad. All right, taking with the rook means after takes, my knight could get access to the d4 square, which is an unprotected square. But then the knight becomes the only piece that is unprotected. And we also hit the queen. The queen can always hit the knight. Bishop back to e5, f4 should win the game. So takes, knight d4, queen hits the knight. I don't really like that. If I takes, he gets the pass pawn, but that same pass pawn is an ISA pawn. There's immediate knight to d4. No. Does that work? I think he's still going to just move the queen. All right, we're going to work with it, guys. We're going to work with it. Let's take. I'm just going to have to prove that I have very good piece coordination. Where does my knight belong? Knight c5, there's b4. God, I do not want to play passive move, but we have to do it for the time being. Like eventually my king is always going to be safe. Once I don't allow anything weird, I mean, at the end of the day, I have 3 pieces, he only has 2 pieces. And I do not think the rook definitely does not belong behind the pawn because this pawn is just easily blockaded. I mean, we spoke about this. The minor pieces are usually the best blockaders. And already my bishop is blockading his pass pawn. So I think he needs his rook on the open files, try to create some havoc, but my king is safe. If I'm able to trade the queens and ensure that the pass pawn does not move, then eventually I'll be able to get my king in the game and win the pawn. I think that would be the most comfortable way to win this game. Okay, queen moves. We only have 2 minutes on the clock, so let's play fast. King g7. It's kind of like a waiting move. It's kind of like improving my position slightly. Eventually, in the end game, my king will be able to join, and this knight on f8 should be going back to e5 or c5, depending on what happens. Okay, he really wants the queen trade. Nah, that's not the idea, bro. I want the queen trade, not you. And I'm assuming he thinks his pawn is just so safe once he plays c4. But once I do not allow the pawn on the c5 square, I'm fine. So now we should just try to activate our king. Let's play f5 and try to get the king in the game. Rook e1, trying to get the rook on e8 is annoying. He's trying to improve his king now. Check. King move, king up, push. That pawn is not going anywhere. Let's make it a bit harder for the... Nah, that did not make it harder for the king. Let me just focus on improving my king. Time is not my friend right now. We need all the pieces to be as active as possible. This is kind of like the position that I wanted, to be honest. Like having the two pieces, once the pawns are not going anywhere, eventually I'll be able to get something from this. Now I need to come up with a winning plan though. Like I have 4 pawns on the king side. He has 3 pawns on the king side, which means rolling my king side pawns up the board is a plan. Now that he plays f4, imagine a knight on this e4 square. That's how you guys should be thinking. So now I'm going to pull the bishop back so that way my knight gets access to the e4 square. That's going to be such a nice square for the knight. And he's now having a lot of weaknesses. His king and his rook is in a knight fork pattern. He needs to ensure that his pieces are on open files. I want you guys to notice how all my pieces are protecting each other. Very, very good coordination here. Okay, king move, we centralize the knight. Looks like a fork to me. I'm attacking 2 unprotected pawns, but I'm not going to be in a rush to take any of them because he has the rook at the end of the day. So if I open up too many files, things could easily backfire on me. So pawn g4, if I takes rook here, I check. Yo, it's a pawn, bro. I don't care. Just take the pawn. Yeah, let's just take the pawn. If he puts the rook here, that's another pawn. So now we're up 2, and then that pawn is also going to be hanging. Okay, so he puts the rook there instead, keeping this guarded. Ooh, we got him. Nah, like not in a tactical way, but I finally get the chance to come up with a plan. I take on g4 and then play h5. That, my fellow viewers, is what we call a pass pawn. My pieces are not coordinated here, guys, so I'm just trying to ensure that I'm on the lookout for any tactics. His pawn on f4 is weak, so after the trade, I'm thinking about king f4 trying to win this pawn. A lot of stuff happening. After takes, rook h2. Nah, that can't be good though. Because now this is hanging and my pass pawn is protected. That can't be good, bro. How are you going to protect this pawn? And if he tries to use the rook, that's losing the rook. That's losing the pawn. So let's say he plays king to d4. King d4. I take hit the rook. Side, man. Just play, bro. Just play, bro. Come on. What's the move? Okay, let's just hit the rook. Let's just hit the rook. I need to just roll my pass pawn up the board because the rook is going to get dangerous. He has the pass pawn. Rook here, I don't need to take that pawn. It's already dead. So I'm just going to just roll the pass pawn as far as possible. Like the further up I'm able to roll the pawn, the less... Oh, fudge. Check, there's king back. Check, king here. The knight is under attack, man. That's the thing. So after king back, knight back, rook check, maybe king up or king takes. All right, this is not too bad. Yeah, this is what coordination is, guys. Now whoa, guys, this is perfect coordination. Like literally, look at this. Everything guards each other. That's a free pawn, but why not just start rolling the pass pawn up the board? Nice, that's what we want to see. Go back, sir. Now we start grabbing backside. What am I doing with 30 seconds on the clock, man? It's easy though, guys. I'm not gonna let's not overreact. It's a very simple plan. Like I have a pawn, I just need to turn it into a queen. I can't do this with 30 seconds on the clock. Guard the pawn, push the pawn, hit the rook, queen the pawn. It's that easy. Very good. Very good. Push the pawn, hit the rook, queen the pawn. We're going to be ahead by 2 pieces and we're expecting resignation very, very soon. Like if I win the rook, there's no way I'm not going to convert this with this amount of time on the clock, which is why you want your endgame skills to be on par. Everything guards each other. Peak piece coordination. That's how you don't blunder, by the way. If all your pieces guard each other, it just minimizes your chances of blundering. He's still not able to attack anything, so now it's just a matter of just capturing his pawns. His king is also not able to just pass my half of the board. Like, it really can't. Like, my knight and my bishop is just perfect here. Yeah, it's just a crazy blockade. His pieces it just can't come in. Now I just need to roll to a queen and win the game. All right, we're just going to turn this into a queen. I'm not worried about stalemate since he has the pawn that is able to push. And that, okay, now we're looking for mate. How do I checkmate this guy? Let's just get the king as active as possible. 13 seconds, still a lot of time. Let's get the king active. We're not worried about stalemate once he's able to push the pawn, guys. He pushed the pawn. Now we check. King has to go back, and that's just a checkmate. Or Kann defense against 1800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1800, blessing you guys with some more Kann defense. Let's see what we're gonna face. F3. Yo, this is the fantasy variation of the Caracan. Have I ever faced any fantasy variations? This is crazy. Now, what I know about the fantasy, it is very aggressive. I haven't really faced it a lot, but I know the first few moves, which is to take the pawn on e4. And then once they take back, we play e5. What's the purpose of e5? What e5 does is, for one, if they take, because they played f3 and exposed this diagonal pointing towards their king, I'm also threatening to play queen h4 check, and it will prevent them from castling. So usually in this position, they play knight f3, and that's 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 all I know. That's all I know. Okay, but not pawn c3, bro. Not pawn c3, because now queen h4 comes into play, and he's gonna lose this pawn regardless. Again, maybe it's a trap that I'm falling for because his king is bucks. Is this guy 1800? That's kind of crazy, bro. That's a rook, buddy. What's this? He blocks with the queen, and that's a rook. Again, am I falling for a trap or something? Or isn't that just a rook? Good thing about this is I'm ahead by 6, so worst case scenario, we can always sacrifice back. But already the position is just completely winning. He took the free pawn, basically helping us to develop. His knight is hanging, this pawn is hanging. I'm going to finish my development. He developed his bishop. Okay, guarding the knight. Let's grab this pawn. I'm not really trying to get my queen chopped. And taking this pawn is also attacking his b2 pawn. So he developed his knight in order to guard it. Now I develop my knight, hit the queen, which is the main defender of the g3 pawn. So based on where he puts his queen, he could be losing even more material. So he puts his queen on f4, which is a good score for the queen. This is just winning though, guys. Honestly, like knight f6, I'm just developing. That's going to be a 4. He decides to castle. And obviously, my goal is to trade. Like any opportunity that I get to just trade off every piece off the board, I'm going to take it, bro. Because I'm ahead by 6 whole points. So the queen goes back. Bishop g4 followed by forking here is an idea. Bishop to d6 is also an idea. I'm actually going to go with bishop to d6, even though honestly, it would have been a bit easier if I just trade, but I want to finish my development, and bishop to d6 is attacking his pawn twice. So he develops the knight in order to guard it. Still, we need to be a bit careful about any possibilities of getting our queen trapped. Let's get the king out the center of the board. Still, we're trying to go for a trade here. Knight c4. Finally, he's getting aggressive. Hits my bishop. All right. Let's pull the bishop back. Even though my intention is to trade, I really like this bishop, especially since it applies so much pressure to g3. Now his rook is on the same line as my queen. The bishop is also unprotected. Okay, I think it's time to start trading. He's definitely going to move his knight and try to do some discovered attacks. Maybe I could even swing my rook in the game. Oh my lord, he took with the queen though. But by taking with the queen, that's another piece, buddy. Yo, this guy is plundering all his pieces. I'm now up 9. So even if I sacrifice my queen for something, I'm still going to be winning. So for example, knight f4. Okay, that was something. I can always take here first, but since he's attacking my queen, I'm going to go queen h1. I'm attacking the bishop, and my bishop is already applying pressure to his bishop. That's another piece that we're about to win. So he moves the king, and obviously we're gonna take the free bishop. We're now up 12, bro. Like it is crazy. Like all our pieces are active except this rook. Once we swing this rook in the game, every piece is active. He resigns. More Kann defense against 1900 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1900. Blessing you guys with some more Kann defense. Okay, knight f3, let's go d5. Will it be an exchange? Yeah, it's an exchange variation of the Caracan, guys. So development becomes very easy for us. You know, it's just a matter of developing both of our knights here. And then just after developing both of the knights, now we just develop both of the bishops and then get the king castled. The one thing that we need to be aware of, though, is playing e6 blocks out the light squared bishop. So we want to play moves like bishop f5 or bishop to g4 first. I don't think it matters where we put the bishop, but usually bishop f5, is fine. And then now I'm going to play moves like e6, bishop d6, and castle. Like, just the most normal development. It's going to be a very normal game until eventually I try to outplay him. So, for example, he plays a3. He's trying to prevent me from playing knight b4. Bishop f5 was nice. Because I think I forced him to play a pawn move. I don't think he wanted to play that pawn move. But now we play e6, just continuing with our development. Notice how very simple this is, guys. We have three pieces developed. He's also developing his bishop. I'll develop my bishop. This is also similar to the London system. Like, usually they jump in with the knight on e5. If he takes queen takes, he's only helping me to improve my position. So he did jump in with the knight, and I will use this opportunity to castle my king. Yeah, let's just get the king out the center of the board. There's usually some ideas where we're able to give up the bishop for the knight and then use this knight to target the pawn on d4. So that's always going to be an idea. But for now, 9 moves into the game. All 4 minor pieces are developed. Check. The king is castled. Check. Now we just need to connect the rooks and everything is fine. Ooh, knight b5. He's being very aggressive. He's basically forcing me to take, even though I had that intention anyway. So if I takes pawn takes, knight d7, hit the pawn, I'm not seeing how he's gonna protect that pawn. But then knight d6 is annoying. I take the pawn. I mean, if he takes my bishop, wait, it's very weird. Let's see. All right, this knight move is a bit annoying. I don't think it's the right time to take this knight as yet. So let me just pull the bishop back. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to play a6, force the knight back, and then I may just put the bishop back on d6. Or maybe at that point, I'll take on e5. For example, if you castle here, I just chase the knight. Remember, guys, whenever the opponent has pieces on your half of the board, your plan automatically or becomes you want to neutralize those pieces. It doesn't mean that you need to drop everything and neutralize those pieces, but neutralizing the pieces on your half of the board has to be a plan because the opponent's pieces are more dangerous on your half, especially the knights, especially with you low rated guys who are uncomfortable with knights and knight forks and all of those stuff, and sure to neutralize them. Okay, so he castle. Everything should be going as planned. Kick the knight out of our half. Knight goes back to c3. Give up the bishop for the knight. If pawn takes, knight d7. And if bishop takes, I take knight d7. And it's not winning, by the way. It just gives me a target to attack. So knight went back. What if I play queen b6? Does that work? Because a queen on b6 attacks d4 twice and this unprotected pawn. Queen b6, if he ever plays knight takes, I could even just take this bishop first. Knight goes back, then take the pawn, hit the knight, and this pawn. Queen b6, knight a4, there's queen takes. And if queen takes, there is knight takes. But at that point, I have queen takes bishop. Pawn g3, I may just go here. I mean, knight e7 is kind of what I'm afraid of at that point. Not 100% sure. I mean, if takes, I can always just let's just go queen b6. Worst case scenario, I'll just take back the knight. Knight a4. Okay, the thing is, if he plays knight a4 and then I move the queen back, then I'm just wasting time. So knight a4 is a nice move. Unless if he plays knight a4 and I just take the pawn. But I'm afraid of knight takes e6. Because if I take his queen, he's going to check me here first. And then I move the king, then he takes the queen. At that point, I could take the bishop, but then he takes my bishop, I take his bishop, and I'm fine. Okay, that's not too bad. I think I'm fine there. Okay, so we see knight takes c6. Knight takes c6. If I take the bishop, he's going to check me here. So I'm just going to take back. Taking with the pawn, knight a5 to c5 is very strong. So I'll just take with the queen. So there's no knight a5. Usually the knight on c3 in front of the c pawn is a bit misplaced. So now he's not able to really put the knight on certain squares because he loses this pawn. If he takes, then I'll just play rook takes, eventually put the rook on the file, and I'm chilling. And by the way, guys, if you haven't liked the video as yet, just hit that like button. It takes a second. Help this video to get 1,000 likes. And if you already like the video, thank you for liking. Okay, not bad. Queen c1. Actually, why would he play that move? Do we have a tactic alert here, guys? Like, it could be a tactic alert, but I just have to be a bit careful. I think it's a tactic though. Because what I'm noticing is because he plays queen c1, all of a sudden the queen becomes an overworked piece. And whenever the opponent has an overworked piece, you automatically start thinking about removing the guard. But it's a bit tricky Let's calculate it. So we take the bishop, the queen takes the bishop, the queen no longer guards the pawn, we take the pawn. At that point, my bishop and my queen is on the same line, so I'm expecting rook c1, and then I'll just pull my bishop back. Oh, but then he has a discovered attack with knight e4. That's the thing. And then the rook hits the queen. Unless I'm gonna sack my queen, and I'm not planning on sacking my queen. All right, we're not going into all of that complications. I'm thinking rook c8 here. I mean, rooks still do need files, guys. And this is where I tell you guys, understanding the tactical weakness, very important. Understanding your tactical weaknesses in the position is also important because you don't want to be blundering. This is an unprotected pawn. Oh, maybe that's why he played queen c1 because queen b6 could be targeting them both. Okay, he finally decided to trade. Let's just stay back. And now my plan is just to advance the queen side. Yo, there's no way that move works, bro. Like that just can't work. It just looks weird. And as a higher rated player, we love to see this because obviously our opponent is not going to just blunder out of nowhere. But that's technically a blunder. Like once he takes back, how ugly are those pawns? Now I just get a target automatically. D4, D6 is a target. Queen B6 hits the pawn. The knight is also pinned, so there's no knight moves. And if he uses the queen to guard the pawn, then this is left unprotected. And just like that, he lost a pawn. Now, having double pawns, I wouldn't say it's a tactical weakness in the opponent's position. Obviously, it could become a tactical weakness, but it's more like a strategic or a positional weakness, structural weakness as well. But in my book, surprisingly, I have it as one of the tactical weaknesses. So I think it's the sixth one, I think. And I call it just structural weaknesses. So if you're noticing structural weaknesses, it could also help you to just come up with a plan. And besides structural weaknesses, I have pawn or square that cannot be guarded by another pawn. So, okay, I thought he couldn't move the knight, but bro did move the knight. The thing is, you can't really move the knight, bro. I'm not gonna take your queen. Maybe he thinks I'm gonna take his queen. He's gonna take my queen. Nah, bro. The threat is better than the execution. Once I take this pawn, your queen is now under attack. Your knight is now under attack. And your weak pawn on d3 is now under attack. So he has to pull the knight back to c3. We take the free pawn on d3. Okay, never mind. I didn't see that. There's also queen here, which guards the pawn and the knight. And if he has to pull the knight back, he's still not losing anything. All right, fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. How does this work then? This knight doesn't really have a lot of forward moves. I think I'm just gonna continue with b5, knight here, b4 takes. Nah, like the moment I play b4, I'm helping out his rook. Sure, he's gonna pull the knight back though. Okay, this is one of those positions, guys, where you just want to improve your position. Let's just double up the rooks on the c file, slowly improving the position. This is a weak pawn, by the way, so I'm definitely thinking of knight d7 to e5 or knight d7 to c5, and that's going to help me target the pawns. But before I do all of that, I just want to ensure that all my pieces are active, and rooks needs files, so you don't want to have your rook just pointing towards your own pawn. But the 1900 opponent, he's probably about to resign. What tactical weakness did my opponent just blunder? Let me see if you guys know how to play chess. I think drawback is the fourth one in my book. It's king safety, unprotected pieces, pieces on the same line, drawback. What was the queen doing on d1? It was clearly guarding the knight. You know what I notice with these players? The moment they make a slight mistake, they start blundering. He resigns. More Caro Kann defense against 2,000 level players. Stick around. And their opponent is now 2,000. Let's end things off with a banger of a Caro Kann defense. D4, let's go with D5. We're seeing the advanced variation. Let's play c5 here. This is what I like to do against it. And taking on c5 is one of the theoretical way to do it with some a3, b4 ideas. Just trying to hold on to the pawn. And the moment the knight goes to f3, let's just immediately pin the knight. I mean, you guys already know the setup when they play the advance. We want the knight on the f5 square. We want to play e6, knight c6. So now we see bishop e2. Let's play e6. We're not losing this pawn now. And anytime they play h3, we're just going to take. So now we just develop our pieces normally. If we see c3, We're just going to try to apply as much pressure as possible to d4. And again, any h3, we're just going to take. So c3, we go knight e7. The knight is heading towards the f5 square. h3 was played. We eliminate the knight, one of the main defenders of d4. And if I play knight f5, there's also a possibility. Wait, is there a possibility that he takes? Because takes, what if I take here instead? Nah. All right, guys. Do I take on d4 then play knight f5, hit the pawn? Okay, I'm going to take on d4, but I'm not going to play knight f5, hit the pawn. Because if I play knight f5, bishop e3 is easy. I'm going to go queen b6, hit the pawn. This is a French move. And remember this. They play the advanced variation, target the d4 pawn. That's all. If you know that the goal is to target the d4 pawn, it becomes easier for you to know where to put your pieces. Bishop goes to g4. Why? It attacks one of the main defenders of the d4 pawn. Knight goes to c6, target d4 pawn. Why knight e7? Because eventually it goes to f5, target the d4 pawn. Why queen b6? Target the d4 pawn. You know, so everything targets the d4 pawn. And okay, the dark squared bishop can't really do that, so we're just going to put it on e7 and castle. If you know this, bro, you're going to be coming out of opening. The goal is not necessarily to come out of the opening just winning. Sometimes that's going to happen, but you're going to be coming out of the opening and you're not going to be losing. So he plays knight c3. That's not a pawn. Because if I take the pawn, there's knight b5. Wait, if I take queen takes and then I take, there's no knight b5. He hits this, I take. If I take the pawn, knight b5 hits the queen. He's threatening this check. If I take knight b5, I take another pawn, being a bit greedy, but 2 pawns is a lot of pawns. There's no forks, which means pawn g3 threatens bishop f4. Knight g6 prevents it. Rook e1 hits the queen. Queen, that's too much drama, dog. I think that's just too much drama. Let's just play knight f5 and apply more pressure to the pawn. Now I have what? 3 attackers versus 1 defender. That could still win me the pawn. Like, I'm too old for all of that drama. If he plays bishop to e3, that's usually a move. Queen takes b2. That's something that you guys need to keep in mind. Whenever they move the bishop, you can consider queen takes b2. Doesn't say you should play it because sometimes it's just too much. Like I personally just don't feel comfortable grabbing 3 pawns with my king in the center of the board. But all I could say, that pawn could be a target for the remainder of the game, and I'm black. So just the fact that I'm doing attacking role and he's doing defensive role, like, I'm good with that. Okay, that's the move that confirms that we have a free pawn. Wait, because if I takes, there's queen b3. Nah, it's a pawn. There's queen b4. If I takes, there's no knight b5 threatening any fork. That's a pawn, son. And then all of a sudden, his pawn on e5 also becomes a weakness. So he decides to trade the queens. I'm not really sure which one of them is better to take with. I'm going to choose to take with the f knight so that way I hit the bishop and my c knight is still attacking the pawn. That is the actual better one to take with, because after he moves the bishop, that's another pawn, bro. You're now down by 2 pawns. Guys, I just want to let you Karakan guys know that if you really studied what just happened here, it's the perfect game against the advanced variation. And I know that the typical Karakan player like the other variation and they kind of feel claustrophobic when they play against the advanced. Not to toot my own horn, but this is the perfect game, bro. Well, up to this point, let's not jinx it. So bishop e3 was played. Already that's a fork. Rook move, we grab this. Pawn takes, we grab this. And we're now just trading everything. Wait. His pieces are going to be a bit active though. So rook move, we grab this. Pawn takes, we don't need to grab this as yet, because this knight needs to guard this. This bishop needs development. I'm not going to castle the king, because we're in the end game. All right, knight c2 is the move. Definitely knight c2, but because I'm giving him so much activity, we have to think about it. Like, if I take this bishop, no, there's nothing. Yeah, if I take this bishop, the knight no longer guards f7, and this rook is already active. I'm basically giving him a bunch of activity, but being ahead by 2 pawns is just nice. So we grab this. We do not want a rook on our 7th rank, for sure, for sure. That's why I'm gonna hit him with king d7. And that's why I did not take the bishop, because I couldn't have played king d7 because there would have been a drawback. I'm not afraid of any knight c5. We're eliminating that knight any day. Eventually, I'm going to play rook to c8 and challenge the file. Do you guys see the idea? You see? Know your own weaknesses. If you know your own weaknesses, it means you're stronger because the natural player when they're playing, one of the ways how they blunder, they're only focusing on what they're trying to do and not what the opponent is trying to do. So the moment you're able to know what your own weakness is, then it makes you stronger. For example, rook is on the same line as the king, bishop is on the same line as the king. Automatically, he's threatening rook takes d5, my pawn is pinned. Imagine I'm playing so well and then just blunder a knight like that. The thing is though, the rook is no longer on the file. I'm ahead in material. I want to trade. So now we take. And after he takes back, it's just a matter of development, swing the rook, challenge the file, win a very clean game ahead by 2 pawns. Okay, yo, pawn to e4 is so annoying, bro, because then if I takes, there's some knight c5 stuff. He didn't do it though. So now we swing the rook in the game, and he should not want to trade, but what can he do? If he moves his rook away trying not to trade, my rook gets access to his second rank. Knight back to c3. Okay, guys, bishops are better than knights, but we care? That's the $1 million question. We don't care. Bishop here, if the knight move, that's a trade. A6 also hits the knight. I'm ahead by 2 pawns. You're ahead by 2 pawns. Find the simplest way to win the game, which is to just start trading everything. King moves out the way. We don't care. We are trading. I'm assuming he's going to take with the pawn. Weak pawn, weak pawn, weak pawn, weak pawn. For the more advanced guys out there, these are called pawn islands. Why is it called a pawn island? Because the open files, an island is basically something, a strip of land that is surrounded by sea. So just imagine the open files being sea or water. And that's why they call pawn islands. I only have 2 pawn islands. And because of that, basically say the less amount of pawn islands that you have, the stronger your pawn structure is. We're in the end game, so the goal is to attack pawns. I'm going to target this pawn. The goal is to double up on the c file and then try to win his c pawn. Maybe he's going to want to target this pawn when I move, especially if he plays g5 and I can't play h6. So we also need to ensure that we're patient in the end game as well. E4 is no longer annoying because there's just rook takes. Another thing that you guys need to keep in mind in the end game, we do not trade pawns, we win pawns. So we can always take this pawn, he takes our pawn, we pull back the rook. No, bro, be patient. Protect your pawn, win their pawn. You have to be a bit selfish in the end game, especially when your pawn structure is so strong. You see that? He just wasted time. Put the rook on b1 just to put it back on c1. Now we play rook to c8. Our pieces are active. We're in the end game. We know what to do in the end game. Attack weak pawns, push past pawns, activate the king. I'm just going to play this h6 move because I know that my pawn is unprotected on the file. And he's basically going to be in Zugzwang very soon. Like his pieces are just going to be playing defensive role. But let's just be patient as possible in the end game. Improving the king is just as important as improving or developing your pieces in the opening. You want to ensure that all your pieces are as active as possible. Then you can start rolling the pawns. For example, I already know how I'm going to win this pawn. Like once the pawn gets to b4, his rook is pinned and I'm going to win the pawn. Even if he plays a3, I'm going to play a5, b4. Okay, rook c2 didn't do much. Now we centralize the king. Like that's the most active my king could get. Okay, now he's just wasting time. There's nothing for him to do. But again, I have a plan. Pawn to b4. He played pawn to a3, was expecting that. Now we play a5 and still play b4. He's able to play rook b1 though. At that point, it's just a pawn. Like rook b1, then I take. Don't trade pawns, win them. But this is winning a pawn. Because after I takes, if he decides to trade and then take here, he's losing another pawn. And then instead of being ahead by, wait, yeah, he gets access to my 7th rank, but the king just guards it because my king is just so active. And this is now just really, really winning. You notice how patient we are, guys. We're ahead by 3 pawns. This is a pass pawn that is going to be rolling up the board. Pawn to d4 was an idea. He didn't allow it. All right. How does this work? Let's just push the pass pawn. That's what we do. I'm expecting this move for sure, but after king f6, everything is fine. Okay. Rook goes there. Let's just move the rook. Eventually, I want to roll the pass pawn up the board, but honestly, this is probably one of those pawns that I'm going to trade because it's just not as active as I'd want it to be. Once his rook gets behind the pawn, it's going to be hard unless I'm able to do some tactics. And all he needs to do is to put his king on the g2 square. Still, I need good technique to win this game, but it's still winning. Okay, king move. That is not the score for the king. Ooh, now I'm able to push the pawn, guys. Tactic alert, tactic alert. Okay, this is a tactic alert, but this is also an endgame pattern. that I know. Like, I know I talk about pattern recognition a lot, and that's because you guys need good pattern recognition to be a good chess player. You need to be able to see something and know what to do without thinking too much. And this is one of those cases. Now, because I say tactic alert, you guys have to think about it. But for the players who didn't have to think about it too much, it's because you know the pattern. Once I swing my rook over to h1, I'm basically threatening to queen, and I know that if he takes, the rook and the king will be on the same line. So if he takes the pawn, rook to a2 skewers the rook, and I'm expecting a 2000 rated opponent to resign here. Sure to like the video, guys. Hit subscribe, buy the book, like, do everything. He resigns.